The genesis of the Imperial Army, formerly designated as the Exertus Imperialis, emerged from the Emperor's grand strategic vision during the tumultuous final centuries of the Age of Strife. As warlords and techno-barbarian kingdoms carved up the scarred surface of Terra, the master of mankind recognized that his ambitions extended far beyond the mere conquest of humanity's birthworld. The unification of Terra represented only the first step in a campaign that would ultimately encompass the entire galaxy, requiring military forces capable of sustaining operations across interstellar distances that dwarfed any previous human conflict. During the Unification Wars, the Emperor's initial military campaigns relied heavily upon the genetically enhanced Thunder Warriors, whose superhuman capabilities proved devastatingly effective against the fragmented armies of Terra's warlords. These towering warriors, created through crude but potent genetic manipulation, possessed strength and endurance that allowed them to shatter enemy formations with terrifying efficiency. However, the Emperor's strategic calculations extended beyond the immediate tactical advantages offered by his enhanced soldiers. The Thunder Warriors, for all their martial prowess, suffered from fundamental limitations that rendered them unsuitable for the vast campaigns he envisioned. The genetic instability inherent in the Thunder Warriors' enhancement process created warriors whose lifespans measured in decades rather than centuries, their bodies gradually breaking down under the strain of their augmentations. More critically, their psychological conditioning produced soldiers capable of extraordinary violence, but lacking the discipline and adaptability required for extended garrison duties or complex multi-theater operations. The Emperor recognized that conquering the galaxy would require not merely the ability to destroy enemy forces, but the capacity to hold and administer conquered territories across thousands of worlds. As the Unification Wars progressed and Terra's various factions fell before the Emperor's advancing forces, captured populations provided the foundation for a different approach to military organization. Rather than relying exclusively on genetically enhanced warriors, the Emperor began incorporating baseline humans into his military structure, recognizing their potential as the backbone of a truly galactic military force. These early recruits came primarily from the defeated techno-barbarian tribes, whose warriors possessed combat experience and familiarity with advanced weaponry despite their primitive social structures. The transition from Thunder Warriors to a more conventional military structure occurred gradually throughout the later stages of the Unification Wars. The Emperor's military planners, working under his direct guidance, developed organizational frameworks that could accommodate the vast numbers of soldiers required for interplanetary conquest. Unlike the Thunder Warriors, who operated in relatively small formations optimized for shock assault, the emerging Imperial Army required complex logistical networks capable of supplying millions of soldiers across multiple star systems simultaneously. The recruitment process during these formative years reflected both pragmatic necessity and the Emperor's understanding of human psychology. Former enemies who demonstrated loyalty and competence found themselves integrated into the growing military structure, their knowledge of local terrain and enemy tactics proving invaluable during subsequent campaigns. The techno-barbarian tribes of Terra, despite their primitive political organization, had maintained sophisticated weapons technology and military traditions dating back to the Dark Age of technology. These warriors brought practical combat experience and familiarity with advanced equipment that proved essential during the Army's early development. The Emperor's approach to military recruitment extended beyond simple conscription or voluntary enlistment. His agents systematically identified individuals with leadership potential, technical expertise, or specialized knowledge that could contribute to the Army's growing capabilities. Former warlords who submitted to imperial authority often found themselves appointed as commanders within the new military structure, their understanding of large-scale warfare and troop management making them valuable assets despite their previous opposition to imperial expansion. As the Unification Wars neared their conclusion and the Emperor's attention turned toward the stars, the organizational challenges facing his military forces multiplied exponentially. The conquest of Terra had required coordination between multiple armies operating across a single world, but the Great Crusade would demand the simultaneous management of hundreds of separate campaigns across vast interstellar distances. The communication delays inherent in interstellar travel meant that local commanders would need unprecedented autonomy while maintaining coordination with overall strategic objectives established on Terra. The establishment of Imperial Army High Command represented the Emperor's solution to these logistical challenges. This centralized command structure, based on Terra and reporting directly to the Emperor himself, assumed responsibility for strategic planning, resource allocation, and coordination between the various expedition fleets that would carry the Great Crusade to the stars. The High Command's authority extended across all aspects of military operations, from the recruitment and training of new soldiers to the production and distribution of weapons and equipment. The early organizational structure of Imperial Army High Command reflected the Emperor's preference for hierarchical efficiency combined with operational flexibility. Senior commanders received broad strategic directives while maintaining significant autonomy in their execution, allowing for adaptation to local conditions without requiring constant communication with Terra. This approach proved essential during the Great Crusade's early years, when expedition fleets operated for months or years without direct contact with Imperial command structures. The recruitment base for the Imperial Army expanded dramatically as the first expedition fleets began their work beyond the Sol system. Each newly conquered world provided additional manpower for the growing military machine, with local populations assessed for their potential contributions to Imperial forces. The diversity of human cultures encountered during the early Great Crusade created both opportunities and challenges for Imperial recruiters, as different worlds had developed distinct military traditions and technological capabilities during their isolation throughout the Age of Strife. Worlds that had maintained advanced technology during the Long Night provided recruits with technical expertise essential for operating and maintaining the Imperial Army's increasingly sophisticated equipment. Former PDF forces from these worlds often possessed training and experience that translated directly to Imperial military service, requiring minimal additional preparation before deployment to active theaters. Conversely, worlds that had regressed to more primitive technological levels provided large numbers of potential recruits whose physical conditioning and basic military skills required extensive development before they could contribute effectively to Imperial operations. The logistical infrastructure supporting the Imperial Army's expansion developed through a combination of captured enemy resources and newly constructed facilities. Conquered Forge worlds provided manufacturing capabilities for weapons and equipment, while agricultural worlds supplied the vast quantities of food required to sustain millions of soldiers across multiple campaigns. The establishment of supply lines connecting these production centers to active combat zones represented one of the most complex logistical achievements in human history, requiring coordination between naval assets, ground-based transportation networks, and administrative personnel across hundreds of star systems. The early years of the Great Crusade demonstrated both the potential and the limitations of the Imperial Army's organizational structure. Successful campaigns validated the Emperor's vision of a military force capable of conquering entire star systems through the coordinated application of overwhelming force. However, the challenges of maintaining unit cohesion and loyalty across such vast distances became increasingly apparent as expedition fleets operated independently for extended periods. The integration of conquered populations into Imperial military service created cultural tensions that required careful management by Imperial commanders. Soldiers from different worlds brought varying levels of technological sophistication, military training, and cultural expectations that sometimes conflicted with Imperial doctrine. The process of forging these diverse elements into effective fighting units required skilled leadership and extensive training programs that consumed significant resources and time. The Emperor's decision to create the Space Marine Legions alongside the Imperial Army reflected his recognition that different types of warfare required specialized forces optimized for specific roles. While the genetically enhanced Space Marines provided elite shock troops capable of spearheading the most difficult assaults, the Imperial Army supplied the numerical strength and logistical capability required to hold conquered territory and maintain extended campaigns. This division of responsibilities allowed each force to focus on its particular strengths while supporting the overall objectives of the Great Crusade. The recruitment and training systems established during the Imperial Army's formative years created standardized procedures that could be replicated across multiple worlds and cultures. Basic military training focused on weapons proficiency, unit tactics, and imperial doctrine, while specialized programs developed technical expertise in areas such as vehicle operation, communications, and logistics. The standardization of equipment and procedures across different regiments facilitated coordination between units from different worlds, while maintaining the flexibility required for diverse combat environments. The command hierarchy that emerged from these foundational years established the Lord Commander Militant as the supreme authority over all Imperial Army operations, second only to the Emperor himself in matters of military strategy and deployment. This position, created during the early phases of the Great Crusade, consolidated authority over the vast military machine that would carry Imperial forces across the galaxy. The Lord Commander Militant maintained direct oversight of strategic planning, resource allocation, and coordination between the numerous expedition fleets that formed the spearhead of Imperial expansion. Beneath the Lord Commander Militant, the command structure branched into regional authorities responsible for specific sectors of the expanding Imperium. Sector commanders held authority over multiple expedition fleets operating within their designated regions, coordinating supply lines, reinforcement schedules, and strategic objectives across dozens of star systems. These commanders typically maintained their headquarters aboard massive command vessels capable of supporting the extensive communication networks required to coordinate operations across interstellar distances. The expedition fleet commanders represented the next tier of authority, each responsible for the conquest and pacification of entire star systems. These officers commanded combined forces that included multiple Imperial Army regiments, supporting naval assets and coordination elements for Space Marine Legion operations when present. The autonomy granted to expedition commanders reflected the practical necessities of interstellar warfare, where communication delays measured in months made centralized tactical control impossible. Individual regiment commanders formed the backbone of the Imperial Army's operational structure, each responsible for forces numbering between 10,000 and 50,000 soldiers, depending on the regiment's specific role and composition. These officers maintained direct command over their unit's day-to-day operations, while coordinating with other regimental commanders within their expedition fleet. The diversity of regimental types required commanders with specialized knowledge of their unit's capabilities and limitations, from armored formations to artillery specialists. Imperial Army High Command established its primary headquarters within the Himalayan mountains on Terra, occupying vast underground complexes that housed the administrative machinery required to coordinate military operations across the galaxy. These facilities contained strategic planning centers equipped with hololithic displays capable of presenting real-time intelligence from active theaters, though the information often arrived weeks or months after the events it depicted. The High Command staff included thousands of analysts, logisticians, and communications specialists responsible for maintaining coordination between the far-flung elements of the Imperial Army. The relationship between Imperial Army High Command and the Space Marine Legions required careful coordination to maximize the effectiveness of both forces during joint operations. The legions operated under their own command structures, reporting directly to the Emperor through their primarchs, creating potential conflicts when Imperial Army and Space Marine forces operated in the same theater. High Command developed liaison protocols that established clear chains of authority during combined operations while respecting the independence of Legion command structures. Joint planning sessions between Imperial Army commanders and Space Marine Legion representatives became standard procedure during major campaign preparations. These meetings addressed tactical coordination, logistical support requirements, and the division of objectives between the two forces. Imperial Army commanders learned to leverage the Space Marines' shock assault capabilities while positioning their own forces to exploit the breaches created by Legion operations. The Space Marines, in turn, relied upon Imperial Army units to secure conquered territory and maintain supply lines that enabled sustained Legion operations. The integration of Mechanicum forces into Imperial Army operations created additional layers of complexity within the command structure. Tech priests and their servitor armies operated under the authority of the Fabricator General on Mars, creating a third independent command hierarchy that required coordination with both Imperial Army and Space Marine elements. The Mechanicum's specialized knowledge of advanced technology made their participation essential for campaigns involving heavily fortified positions or enemies employing sophisticated defensive systems. Combined arms doctrine evolved through practical experience during the early years of the Great Crusade, as Imperial commanders learned to coordinate the diverse capabilities of their forces. Imperial Army infantry provided the numerical strength required to hold captured positions and absorb enemy counterattacks, while armored formations delivered concentrated firepower and mobility for breakthrough operations. Artillery units supplied long-range fire support that could neutralize enemy strongpoints before assault forces advanced, reducing casualties among attacking troops. The Mechanicum's contribution to combined arms operations extended beyond their combat units to include technical support and battlefield analysis. Tech priests accompanied Imperial Army formations to provide maintenance for complex equipment and analysis of enemy technology encountered during campaigns. Their ability to quickly adapt captured enemy weapons and defensive systems for Imperial use proved invaluable during extended campaigns where resupply from Imperial production centers remained uncertain. Administrative divisions within the Imperial Army reflected the diverse requirements of interstellar military operations. Line regiments formed the core combat formations, organized around standard infantry, armored, or mechanized structures depending on their intended role. These regiments maintained standardized equipment loadouts and training protocols that facilitated coordination between units from different worlds while preserving tactical flexibility for local commanders. Support units provided the logistical backbone that enabled line regiments to maintain operations across extended campaigns. Engineering regiments constructed fortifications, repaired damaged equipment, and established infrastructure required for sustained military operations on conquered worlds. Medical units treated casualties and maintained the health of Imperial forces operating in hostile environments, while communication regiments maintained the networks that connected scattered Imperial forces across multiple star systems. Transport regiments managed the movement of personnel and supplies between different theaters of operation, coordinating with naval assets to ensure efficient distribution of resources. These units required specialized knowledge of interstellar logistics and the ability to adapt quickly to changing operational requirements as campaigns developed. Their commanders worked closely with fleet logistics officers to optimize cargo manifests and transportation schedules that maximize the combat effectiveness of deployed forces. Specialist formations addressed specific tactical requirements that exceeded the capabilities of standard line regiments. Siege regiments possessed heavy artillery and specialized equipment designed for reducing heavily fortified positions, while reconnaissance regiments provided intelligence gathering capabilities essential for planning major operations. Drop troops trained for rapid deployment from orbital platforms could seize key objectives before enemy forces could organize effective resistance. Chemical warfare specialists operated equipment designed to neutralize enemy forces in environments where conventional weapons proved insufficient, while void warfare regiments trained specifically for combat operations aboard spacecraft and orbital installations. These specialized units required extensive additional training and equipment that made them valuable assets deployed only when their specific capabilities proved essential for mission success. The coordination between different administrative divisions required sophisticated planning and communication systems that could function across interstellar distances. High Command established standardized procedures for requisitioning support from different unit types while maintaining operational security that prevented enemy forces from anticipating Imperial tactical approaches. Regional commanders learned to balance the competing demands of different regiment types while ensuring that critical support remained available when line units required assistance. Training establishments on Terra and other major Imperial worlds developed curricula that prepared officers for command positions within this complex organizational structure. These institutions emphasized the importance of inter-service cooperation and the technical knowledge required to coordinate between different unit types effectively. Graduates received assignments that exposed them to various aspects of Imperial Army operations before advancing to positions of greater responsibility. The expansion of the Imperial Army's organizational structure continued throughout the early decades of the Great Crusade as new worlds joined the Imperium and provided additional manpower for military service. Each conquered system required assessment to determine its optimal contribution to Imperial forces, whether through raw recruits, specialized technical expertise, or industrial production capabilities. This process created an increasingly complex web of dependencies and relationships that challenged even the most experienced military administrators. The systematic recruitment of manpower for the Imperial Army during the Great Crusade represented one of the most ambitious logistical undertakings in human history, requiring the coordination of resources across thousands of worlds to maintain the massive military machine that carried Imperial expansion to the furthest reaches of the galaxy. The implementation of standardized recruitment quotas across compliant worlds emerged from practical necessity as the Emperor's forces encountered the staggering scale of resistance that awaited them among the scattered remnants of humanity's stellar empire. The tithe system that governed Imperial recruitment evolved from the administrative frameworks established during Terra's unification, adapted to address the complexities of interstellar governance and military supply. Each world brought into Imperial compliance received assessment by specialized teams of Imperial administrators who evaluated local population levels, industrial capacity, and existing military traditions to determine appropriate contribution levels to the growing war effort. These assessments considered factors ranging from planetary demographics to environmental conditions that might affect the quality of recruits produced by different worlds. Hive worlds with their teeming billions provided the largest absolute numbers of potential recruits, their undercity populations offering seemingly inexhaustible manpower reserves for Imperial military service. The harsh conditions prevalent in these urban environments produced individuals already accustomed to violence and scarcity, requiring less conditioning to adapt to military life than recruits from more comfortable circumstances. However, the specialized nature of Hive world existence meant that many recruits required extensive training in basic survival skills and combat techniques that more primitive worlds taught as fundamental life skills. Feudal worlds contributed recruits whose pre-existing martial traditions aligned closely with Imperial military culture, their warrior castes possessing combat experience and weapons proficiency that translated directly to military service. These worlds typically maintained lower population levels than major hive centers, but the quality of their military contributions often exceeded the raw numbers provided by more densely populated systems. The feudal tradition of personal loyalty to authority figures facilitated the integration of these recruits into Imperial command structures, though their attachment to local customs sometimes created friction with standardized military protocols. Forge worlds under Mechanicum control provided specialized technical personnel whose knowledge of advanced systems proved essential for maintaining the Imperial Army's increasingly sophisticated equipment. These recruits brought expertise in fields ranging from vehicle maintenance to communication systems, filling critical support roles that required years of training to develop from baseline recruits. The Mechanicum's influence over these worlds ensured that technical recruits received preliminary augmentation and conditioning that prepared them for the harsh realities of interstellar warfare. Death worlds produced some of the most capable individual soldiers within the Imperial Army, their brutal environments creating survivors whose physical conditioning and combat instincts exceeded those of recruits from more hospitable planets. The relatively small populations of these worlds limited their absolute contribution to Imperial forces, but Death World regiments earned reputations for exceptional performance in the most challenging combat environments. Their recruitment often involved competition between different tribal or clan groups, with military service representing both honor and opportunity for advancement within their societies. The establishment of recruitment quotas required careful balancing between military necessity and the maintenance of planetary stability. Excessive recruitment could destabilize local governments or damage industrial production essential for Imperial war efforts, while insufficient contributions failed to meet the manpower requirements of expanding military operations. Imperial administrators developed sophisticated models that projected optimal recruitment levels based on demographic analysis, economic capacity, and strategic importance of different worlds within the growing Imperium. Recruitment officers dispatched to compliant worlds operated under standardized protocols that ensured consistent quality while adapting to local conditions and customs. These officers typically arrived aboard dedicated transport vessels, equipped with medical facilities for preliminary health assessments and basic processing equipment for new recruits. Their responsibilities extended beyond simple manpower collection to include evaluation of local military traditions, identification of potential officer candidates, and assessment of specialized skills that might prove valuable for Imperial service. The processing of new recruits involved comprehensive medical examinations that screened for genetic defects, disease, and physical conditioning suitable for military service. Imperial medical standards rejected candidates with conditions that might compromise unit effectiveness or require excessive medical resources during extended campaigns. However, the scale of Imperial recruitment meant that standards varied depending on immediate manpower requirements and the availability of alternative sources for specific types of personnel. Psychological evaluation formed another critical component of the recruitment process, identifying individuals whose mental conditioning suited them for different aspects of military service. Candidates displaying leadership potential received additional assessment for officer training programs, while those showing technical aptitude were directed towards specialized support roles. The psychological screening also identified individuals whose loyalty or stability might pose risks to unit cohesion, though the urgent manpower requirements of the Great Crusade meant that borderline cases often received acceptance with additional monitoring during training. Training facilities established across the expanding Imperium reflected the massive scale of military preparation required to transform civilian populations into effective soldiers. Terra itself hosted the most advanced training centers, their programs serving as the standard against which all other facilities measured their effectiveness. The Terran training establishments occupied vast complexes in the Urals, the Gobi Wastes, and the Australian Dead Zones, their harsh environments providing realistic preparation for the hostile conditions that Imperial forces encountered throughout the galaxy. The primary Terran facilities specialized in officer training and advanced technical instruction, their curricula drawing upon the accumulated military knowledge of humanity's greatest strategic minds. Prospective officers from across the Imperium traveled to Terra for intensive courses that covered everything from small unit tactics to fleet-level logistics coordination. These programs emphasize the importance of adaptability and independent decision-making that would prove essential when communication delays prevented real-time coordination with higher command authorities. Mars maintained specialized training facilities that focused on technical instruction and the integration of mechanicum technology into Imperial military operations. These centers produced the technical specialists required to operate and maintain the sophisticated equipment that gave Imperial forces their technological advantage over many enemies encountered during the Great Crusade. The Martian facilities also served as testing grounds for new weapon systems and tactical doctrines developed through collaboration between Imperial Army High Command and the Mechanicum's research divisions. Major fortress worlds throughout the expanding Imperium established regional training centers that served multiple star systems within their operational areas. These facilities reduced the logistical burden of transporting all recruits to Terra or Mars, while maintaining standardized training protocols across the Imperial military structure. Regional centers typically specialized in specific types of training based on local conditions and expertise, with some focusing on armored warfare, while others emphasized infantry tactics or siege operations. The fortress world of Cadia developed particularly sophisticated training programs that emphasized combined arms coordination and defensive operations. Its strategic location near the Eye of Terror created opportunities for realistic training against actual hostile forces, though the dangerous nature of this environment limited such exercises to the most advanced trainees. Cadian training methods influenced doctrinal development throughout the Imperial Army, their emphasis on disciplined fire control and coordinated unit movement becoming standard practice across many other training facilities. Vos Prime established itself as a center for mechanized warfare instruction, its industrial capacity supporting extensive vehicle training programs that prepared crews for the complex coordination required in armored operations. The planet's varied terrain provided realistic environments for practicing different aspects of mechanized combat, from urban warfare in its industrial centers to open terrain maneuvers across its mineral extraction zones. Vos Prime's training programs produced many of the Imperial Army's most skilled vehicle crews and mechanized unit commanders. Standardization efforts across these diverse training facilities required constant coordination between different worlds and military traditions. Imperial Army High Command established minimum competency standards that all facilities were required to meet, while allowing flexibility for specialized programs that addressed specific operational requirements. This approach ensured that soldiers from different training centers could function effectively together while preserving the tactical advantages offered by specialized instruction. The challenge of maintaining standardization while respecting local military traditions created ongoing tension throughout the Imperial Army's expansion. Many worlds possessed warrior cultures with centuries or millennia of military development, their traditional methods often proving effective in specific environments or against particular types of enemies. Imperial training doctrine sought to preserve these advantages while ensuring that local forces could integrate effectively with units from other worlds during combined operations. Chigorian recruits brought expertise in rapid mobility and hit and run tactics that proved invaluable during reconnaissance and harassment operations. Their traditional emphasis on speed and maneuverability complemented Imperial mechanized doctrine while offering alternative approaches for situations where heavy equipment proved impractical. Training programs for Chigorian units focused on integrating their mobility expertise with Imperial communications and logistics systems, while preserving the tactical flexibility that made them effective. Catachan recruits possessed unmatched expertise in jungle warfare and survival techniques that proved essential during campaigns on death worlds and hostile environments. Their training programs emphasized the adaptation of their specialized skills to different planetary conditions, while teaching them to operate Imperial equipment in extreme environments. Catachan methods influenced survival training protocols throughout the Imperial Army, their techniques being incorporated into standard curricula for units expected to operate in hostile conditions. Tallarn desert fighters contributed expertise in arid environment operations and mechanized warfare adapted to extreme conditions. Their traditional methods of vehicle maintenance and navigation in harsh environments proved valuable during campaigns on desert worlds and other challenging terrains. Training programs for Tallarn units focused on scaling their techniques to larger formations while maintaining the individual skills that made them effective in their specialized environment. Quality control measures implemented across Imperial training facilities ensured that minimum combat effectiveness standards were maintained regardless of local variations in training methods. Regular inspections by teams from Imperial Army High Command evaluated facility performance and identified areas requiring improvement or additional resources. These inspections assessed both the technical competency of graduates and their integration into broader Imperial military culture. Standardized testing protocols measured recruit progress in areas ranging from weapons proficiency to tactical knowledge, ensuring that graduates met minimum requirements before assignment to active units. These tests adapted to different specializations while maintaining consistent standards that allowed commanders to predict unit capabilities based on training records. The testing system also identified exceptional performers who received recommendations for advanced training or accelerated promotion opportunities. Live fire exercises provided realistic assessment of unit readiness while identifying deficiencies in training programs that required correction. These exercises simulated combat conditions as closely as possible without exposing recruits to unnecessary casualties, using advanced target systems and scenario generators that created dynamic tactical situations. The results of these exercises informed ongoing refinements to training curricula and identified best practices that could be shared between different facilities. The establishment of minimum combat effectiveness standards required careful definition of competency levels appropriate for different types of units and operational environments. Line infantry regiments required demonstrated proficiency in basic weapons handling, small unit tactics, and coordination with supporting elements, while specialized units needed additional skills specific to their intended roles. These standards evolved based on combat experience and lessons learned from active theaters, ensuring that training remained relevant to actual operational requirements. Regular rotation of instructors between different training facilities facilitated the sharing of best practices and prevented the development of isolated training cultures that might diverge from Imperial standards. Experienced combat veterans served tour as instructors, bringing practical knowledge from active theaters to training programs while gaining exposure to different approaches and techniques. This rotation system also identified talented instructors who could contribute to the development of new training methods and doctrinal innovations. The integration of captured enemy equipment and techniques into training programs provided recruits with knowledge of potential threats they might encounter during active operations. Analysis of enemy weapons, tactics, and organizational methods informed the development of countermeasures and defensive techniques that improved Imperial unit survivability. This intelligence also contributed to the refinement of Imperial equipment and tactics, creating a continuous improvement cycle that enhanced overall military effectiveness. The logistical complexity of equipping the Imperial Army during the Great Crusade dwarfed any previous military undertaking in human history, requiring the coordination of production facilities across thousands of worlds to supply standardized weaponry and equipment to millions of soldiers operating simultaneously across multiple galactic sectors. The establishment of uniform equipment patterns represented both a practical necessity for maintaining interoperability between units from different worlds and a philosophical commitment to Imperial unity that transcended local manufacturing traditions and technological variations. The lasgun emerged as the primary individual weapon of Imperial Army infantry formations, its reliable performance and ease of maintenance making it ideally suited for the diverse operational environments encountered during galactic conquest. The weapon's energy-based operation eliminated the logistical burden of manufacturing and transporting solid ammunition across interstellar distances, while its standardized power pack system allowed for universal compatibility between different manufacturers and mark variants. The basic M35 pattern lasgun featured a 30-shot power pack capacity with selective fire capability, its focused energy beam proving effective against both unarmored personnel and light vehicle targets at ranges exceeding 300 meters. Regional variations of the standard lasgun pattern reflected local manufacturing capabilities and environmental requirements while maintaining core operational characteristics that ensured tactical compatibility. The M36 pattern produced on Lucius featured enhanced focusing, arrays that increased effective range and penetration power, making it particularly valuable for units operating in open terrain environments. Conversely, the compact M35S variant manufactured on Necromunda incorporated shortened barrel assemblies and folding stocks that facilitated use in confined spaces typical of Hive World urban combat. Power pack standardization across different lasgun variants required extensive coordination between forge worlds and manufacturing centers throughout the expanding Imperium. The universal power pack design incorporated safety features that prevented catastrophic overload while allowing for field modification of output levels to match specific tactical requirements. Standard power packs provided 30 shots at normal power settings, though emergency overcharge modes could deliver enhanced penetration at the cost of reduced ammunition capacity and increased risk of weapon malfunction. The autogun served as the standard issue weapon for Imperial Army units operating in environments where energy weapons proved impractical or where local manufacturing capabilities favored solid projectile systems. The weapon's robust construction and mechanical simplicity made it particularly suitable for units recruited from worlds with limited technical infrastructure, while its ammunition compatibility with captured enemy weapons provided tactical flexibility during extended campaigns. The standard M32 autogun fired .75 caliber solid rounds from 30-round detachable magazines, its selective fire capability providing both semi-automatic precision and full automatic suppressive fire modes. Ammunition production for autogun-equipped units required extensive industrial coordination to ensure adequate supply across multiple theaters of operation. The standard .75 caliber round incorporated a hardened penetrator core surrounded by expanding material designed to maximize stopping power against unarmored targets while retaining effectiveness against light armor systems. Specialized ammunition variants included armor-piercing rounds with depleted uranium cores for anti-vehicle use and explosive-tipped rounds for enhanced anti-personnel effectiveness in urban combat environments. Heavy weapon systems within Imperial Army formations provided the concentrated firepower necessary to neutralize enemy armor and fortified positions that exceeded the capabilities of individual soldier weapons. The heavy bolter represented the standard squad automatic weapon, its .75 caliber mass reactive rounds delivering devastating effectiveness against both personnel and light vehicle targets. The weapon's belt-fed ammunition system allowed for sustained fire during defensive operations, while its relatively compact design facilitated tactical mobility during offensive maneuvers. Lascannon teams provided long-range anti-armor capability that could engage enemy vehicles at distances exceeding 1,500 meters, their focused energy beams capable of penetrating even heavy armor plating with precise shot placement. The weapon's substantial power requirements necessitated dedicated power generation systems that limited tactical mobility but provided devastating firepower when properly positioned. Lascannon crews typically operated from prepared positions with pre-positioned ammunition and power supplies that enabled sustained engagement of multiple targets during extended firefights. Missile launcher systems offered tactical flexibility through their ability to engage different target types using specialized ammunition. High explosive rounds provided area effect capability against infantry formations and light structures, while armor-piercing warheads could penetrate heavy vehicle armor at moderate ranges. The weapon's relatively lightweight construction allowed individual soldiers to carry and operate the system independently, though ammunition resupply requirements limited sustained operations without dedicated logistics support. Mortar systems bridged the gap between individual weapons and dedicated artillery, providing indirect fire support that could engage targets beyond direct line of sight. The standard 60 mortar could deliver high explosive rounds to ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, its lightweight construction allowing infantry squads to carry the weapon and basic ammunition loads during tactical movements. Larger 81 mortars provided enhanced range and explosive power, but required dedicated crews and vehicle transport for tactical mobility. Artillery formations within Imperial Army regiments provided the concentrated firepower necessary to neutralize enemy strongpoints and provide fire support for advancing infantry formations. The standard field artillery piece varied between different regiment types, with infantry formations typically employing towed systems that balanced firepower with tactical mobility. The Earthshaker cannon represented the most common artillery system, its 132 bore delivering high explosive rounds to ranges exceeding 15 kilometers, with devastating effectiveness against both personnel and structures. Self-propelled artillery systems offered enhanced tactical mobility at the cost of increased logistical complexity and maintenance requirements. The Basilisk artillery platform mounted an Earthshaker cannon on a tracked chassis derived from the Chimera transport, providing artillery units with the ability to reposition quickly in response to changing tactical situations. The vehicle's enclosed crew compartment offered protection against counter-battery fire and environmental hazards while maintaining the communication systems necessary for coordinated fire missions. The Medusa siege cannon provided specialized capability for reducing heavily fortified positions that exceeded the penetration power of standard field artillery. Its massive 217 bore could deliver specialized bunker-busting rounds designed to collapse underground installations and penetrate reinforced defensive positions. The weapon's substantial weight and ammunition requirements limited its tactical mobility, typically requiring dedicated transport vehicles and extensive logistical support for sustained operations. Vehicle assets within Imperial Army formations ranged from basic transport systems to heavily armored battle tanks, their diversity reflecting the varied operational requirements encountered during galactic conquest campaigns. The Rhino armored personnel carrier served as the foundation for mechanized infantry operations, its versatile chassis supporting numerous specialized variants while maintaining standardized maintenance and logistics requirements. The basic Rhino could transport 10 fully equipped soldiers while providing protection against small arms fire and shell fragments, its tracked propulsion system enabling operation across diverse terrain types. Chimera infantry fighting vehicles represented an evolution of the basic Rhino design, incorporating enhanced armor protection and integrated weapon systems that allowed transported infantry to engage targets while remaining undercover. The vehicle's multi-laser armament provided effective anti-personnel capability, while its heavy bolter could engage light vehicle targets. The Chimera's modular design facilitated field modifications that adapted the vehicle to specific mission requirements, from command variants with enhanced communication systems to medical evacuation configurations with specialized life support equipment. The Leman Russ battle tank formed the backbone of Imperial Army armored formations, its robust construction and powerful main armament providing the heavy firepower necessary to engage enemy armor and fortified positions. The standard Leman Russ mounted a 120 battle cannon capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, while secondary armament typically included a hull-mounted heavy bolter and sponson-mounted weapon systems. The tank's thick armor plating provided protection against most enemy anti-tank weapons, while its reliable mechanical systems ensured operational availability during extended campaigns. Specialized Leman Russ variants addressed specific tactical requirements that exceeded the capabilities of the standard battle tank configuration. The Demolisher variant mounted a massive siege cannon designed for urban combat and fortification reduction, its short range but devastating firepower proving essential during city fighting and siege operations. The Punisher variant incorporated a rapid-fire Gatling cannon optimized for anti-personnel use, its high rate of fire making it particularly effective against massed infantry formations and light vehicle swarms. Baneblade Super Heavy tanks provided the ultimate expression of Imperial armored warfare capability, their massive size and overwhelming firepower making them capable of single-handedly breaking enemy defensive lines. The vehicle's primary armament consisted of a super heavy battle cannon supplemented by multiple secondary weapon systems that provided all-around defensive capability. The Baneblade's thick armor plating could withstand direct hits from enemy anti-tank weapons, while its size allowed for the incorporation of command and control systems that coordinated entire armored formations. Logistical challenges associated with equipping Imperial Army formations across galactic distances required innovative solutions that balanced standardization with local production capabilities. The establishment of standard template construct patterns ensured that critical equipment could be manufactured on any world with sufficient industrial infrastructure, reducing dependence on long-distance supply lines that remained vulnerable to enemy interdiction. These templates provided detailed specifications for everything from individual weapons to complex vehicle systems, enabling local production that met Imperial quality standards. Forge World production capabilities represented the pinnacle of Imperial manufacturing technology, their advanced facilities producing the highest quality equipment available to Imperial forces. The Forge Worlds maintained extensive research and development programs that continuously refined existing designs while developing new systems to address emerging tactical requirements. Their production lines could manufacture complete vehicle systems, including sophisticated electronics and weapon systems that exceeded the capabilities of most planetary manufacturing centers. The Mechanicum's role in equipment standardization extended beyond simple manufacturing oversight to include the development of maintenance protocols and training programs that ensured consistent equipment performance across all Imperial Army units. Tech adepts assigned to military formations provided technical expertise that enabled field repair of complex systems while identifying equipment modifications that improved battlefield effectiveness. Their reports contributed to ongoing design refinements that incorporated combat experience into future production runs. Supply chain management for Imperial Army equipment required sophisticated coordination between production centers, transportation networks, and forward logistics bases that could maintain adequate inventory levels despite the unpredictable demands of active combat operations. Regional supply depots established at strategic locations throughout Imperial space served as distribution centers that could respond rapidly to urgent equipment requirements while maintaining strategic reserves for major operations. These facilities incorporated advanced inventory management systems that tracked equipment distribution and identified potential shortages before they affected operational readiness. Quality control measures implemented across Imperial production facilities ensured that equipment met minimum performance standards regardless of manufacturing location or local technological capabilities. Regular inspections by Mechanicum quality assurance teams verified that production processes followed established templates while identifying opportunities for improvement in manufacturing efficiency or product reliability. These inspections also served to identify facilities capable of producing specialized equipment that required advanced technical capabilities. Field maintenance capabilities within Imperial Army units reflected the practical necessity of maintaining equipment readiness during extended operations far from established supply bases. Each regiment included technical specialists trained in the repair and maintenance of standard equipment types, their expertise enabling units to maintain operational capability despite the inevitable wear and damage associated with combat operations. These specialists worked closely with attached Mechanicum personnel to ensure that complex systems received appropriate technical support while training regiment personnel in basic maintenance procedures. Spare parts distribution represented one of the most challenging aspects of Imperial Army logistics, requiring accurate prediction of failure rates and usage patterns across diverse operational environments. Standardized component designs enabled parts commonality between different equipment types, reducing inventory requirements while ensuring that critical repairs could be completed using available resources. Forward logistics elements maintained strategic reserves of high-failure components while establishing repair priorities that maximized overall unit effectiveness. The integration of captured enemy equipment into Imperial Army operations provided both opportunities and challenges for logistics planners and technical specialists. Useful enemy systems could supplement Imperial equipment when properly evaluated and integrated, but their incorporation required extensive technical analysis to ensure compatibility with existing logistics networks. The Mechanicum maintained specialized teams dedicated to the evaluation of captured technology, their assessments determining whether enemy systems warranted integration into Imperial forces or should be studied purely for intelligence purposes. The Great Crusade represented the zenith of Imperial Army operational capability during the Great Crusade, mobilizing the largest concentration of conventional forces ever assembled under the Emperor's banner. The campaign against the Orc Empire of Urlak-Urg required the coordination of over 8 million Imperial Army soldiers drawn from hundreds of regiments across dozens of sectors, their combined strength forming the anvil upon which the Space Marine legions would hammer the Greenskin menace into submission. The scale of logistical preparation alone dwarfed previous military undertakings, with supply convoys stretching across multiple star systems to maintain the vast armies converging on the Ulanor sector. Imperial Army High Command established forward staging areas on 17 different worlds surrounding the Ulanor system, each serving as a massive logistics hub capable of supporting hundreds of thousands of soldiers, while coordinating the intricate dance of supply lines that kept the campaign operational. The fortress world of Vanaheim became the primary command center, its existing military infrastructure expanded to accommodate the strategic planning requirements of the largest military operation in human history. Command bunkers carved deep into the planet's crust housed hololithic displays showing real-time intelligence from across the theater, their walls lined with communication arrays that maintained contact with scattered Imperial forces despite the electromagnetic interference generated by Orc technology. The diversity of Imperial Army units committed to Ulanor reflected the truly galactic scope of the Great Crusade by this period. Cadian shock troops brought their disciplined firepower and defensive expertise, their purple and green uniforms standing in stark contrast to the crimson and gold of Mordian Iron Guard regiments, whose parade ground precision translated into devastating volleys of coordinated Laz fire. Catachan jungle fighters adapted their stealth and survival skills to the industrial wasteland environments that characterized many Orc-held worlds, while Talorn Desert Raiders employed their mechanized expertise to strike at enemy supply convoys across the system's arid outer planets. The initial phases of the Ulanor campaign demonstrated the Imperial Army's evolution into a sophisticated combined arms force capable of independent operations against major enemy concentrations. Armored spearheads led by Leman Russ battle tanks punched through Orc defensive lines, while mechanized infantry in Chimera transports exploited the breaches, their coordinated advance supported by massed artillery, barrages from Basilisk and Medusa platforms positioned in carefully prepared fire bases. The thunder of thousands of guns created a continuous roar that could be heard across entire continents, their concentrated firepower reducing Orc strongholds to rubble before Imperial infantry advanced to clear the wreckage. Artillery coordination reached unprecedented levels of sophistication during the Ulanner campaign, with battery commanders employing complex fire control systems that synchronized the efforts of entire artillery corps across multiple planetary surfaces. Forward observers embedded with advancing infantry units called in precision strikes using encrypted communication protocols that prevented Orc forces from intercepting targeting information. The systematic destruction of enemy fortifications required careful calculation of ammunition expenditure rates, with logistics officers maintaining detailed projections of shell consumption that ensured adequate supplies remained available for sustained bombardments. The Siege of Goro demonstrated Imperial Army capabilities in reducing heavily fortified positions through methodical application of overwhelming firepower and coordinated assault tactics. The Orc fortress city sprawled across an entire continent, its ramshackle but effective defenses incorporating salvaged Imperial equipment alongside crude but functional Orc engineering. Imperial forces established a siege perimeter extending over 3,000 kilometers, their positions connected by communication trenches and supply routes that enabled coordinated operations despite the enormous scale of the battlefield. Specialized siege regiments deployed heavy artillery pieces that had been transported across multiple star systems, specifically for the reduction of major fortifications. Earthshaker cannons provided continuous bombardment of enemy positions, while Medusa siege guns targeted specific structural weak points identified through aerial reconnaissance. The systematic destruction of Goro's outer defenses required 6 months of continuous artillery fire, with ammunition consumption reaching levels that strained even the Imperial Army's sophisticated logistics network. Engineering regiments played crucial roles during the Goro siege, constructing the elaborate trench systems and supply routes that enabled Imperial forces to maintain their positions despite constant Orc counterattacks. Sapper teams advanced underground tunnel networks toward enemy positions, their progress protected by heavy timber supports and ventilation systems that allowed sustained operations in the confined spaces beneath the battlefield. The placement of massive explosive charges beneath key enemy strongpoints required precise timing and coordination with surface assaults to maximize the effectiveness of combined operations. The final assault on Goro showcased the Imperial Army's ability to coordinate complex multi-phase operations involving thousands of separate units advancing simultaneously across a continental battlefield. Infantry regiments advanced behind creeping artillery barrages that suppressed enemy defensive fire, while armored formations exploited gaps in the Orc lines. Combat engineers cleared obstacles and established bridgeheads across the fortress city's defensive moats, while medical units established casualty collection points that could process the thousands of wounded generated during major assault operations. Urban combat within Goro's ruins tested Imperial Army training and equipment against the chaotic environment of close quarters fighting in destroyed buildings and rubble-strewn streets. Infantry squads adapted their tactics to the confined spaces and limited visibility that characterized city fighting, using grenades and flamers to clear enemy positions room by room. The systematic clearing of each district required careful coordination between different regiment types, with armored units providing fire support while infantry secured key intersections and communication nodes. The compliance actions conducted across the galaxy during this period demonstrated the Imperial Army's versatility in adapting to diverse enemy types and operational environments. The campaign against the human stellar empire of the Oresian technocracy required different tactical approaches than those employed against Orc forces, as the enemy possessed sophisticated technology and military organization that demanded careful intelligence preparation and coordinated multi-phase operations. The Oresian technocracy controlled 17 star systems connected by advanced communication networks that enabled rapid coordination between their defensive forces. Imperial intelligence services identified key communication nodes and industrial centers whose destruction would cripple enemy coordination while preserving valuable infrastructure for Imperial use. The campaign plan called for simultaneous strikes against multiple targets to prevent enemy forces from concentrating their defenses while maintaining pressure across the entire theater. Reconnaissance regiments played essential roles during the Oreshan campaign, their stealth capabilities enabling deep penetration of enemy territory to gather intelligence on defensive positions and troop movements. Long-range patrol units operated behind enemy lines for months at a time, establishing hidden observation posts that monitored enemy supply convoys and communication traffic. The intelligence gathered through these operations enabled Imperial commanders to identify enemy weak points and plan attacks that maximized tactical surprise while minimizing Imperial casualties. The assault on the Oreshan fortress world of Krynn demonstrated Imperial Army proficiency in combined operations against technologically sophisticated enemies. The planet's orbital defense platforms required coordination with Imperial Navy assets to neutralize, while surface-based shield generators protected key installations from orbital bombardment. Imperial Army forces conducted simultaneous landings at multiple points across the planet's surface, their diversified approach preventing enemy forces from concentrating their defenses against any single landing zone. Drop trooper regiments spearheaded the initial assault on Krynn, their specialized training and equipment enabling rapid seizure of key objectives before enemy forces could organize effective resistance. Grav chute insertions delivered entire companies directly onto enemy positions, their sudden appearance creating confusion and disruption that facilitated the landing of follow-on forces. The coordination between orbital and surface elements required precise timing and communication that demonstrated the Imperial Army's evolution into a truly three-dimensional fighting force. The reduction of Oreshan shield generators required specialized assault techniques that combined direct frontal attacks with infiltration operations designed to disable defensive systems from within. Combat engineers employed shaped charges and melta-weapons to breach heavily armored installations, while infantry cleared defensive positions that protected critical control systems. The systematic destruction of each shield generator created expanding zones of vulnerability that enabled orbital fire support to engage previously protected targets. Mechanized formations exploited the breaches created by initial assault forces, their rapid advance preventing enemy forces from establishing secondary defensive lines. Chimera-mounted infantry secured key road junctions and communication centers, while Leman Russ tanks engaged enemy armor formations in running battles across the planet's industrial zones. The coordination between different unit types required sophisticated command and control systems that enabled real-time tactical adjustments based on rapidly changing battlefield conditions. The campaign against the Stellar Empire of 6319 presented different challenges that tested Imperial Army capabilities against an enemy that employed extensive fortification and defensive mining. The system's primary world featured underground installations that extended deep into the planet's crust, their interconnected tunnel networks creating a three-dimensional battlefield that negated many conventional tactical advantages. Imperial forces adapted their assault techniques to address the unique requirements of subterranean warfare while maintaining coordination with surface operations. Specialized tunnel fighting regiments received intensive training in underground combat techniques that emphasized close-quarters fighting and the use of specialized equipment designed for confined spaces. Compact lasguns and shotguns replaced standard infantry weapons in tunnel environments where longer-range engagements proved impractical, while portable lighting systems and communication equipment enabled coordination in the darkness of underground installations. The systematic clearing of enemy tunnel networks required methodical advance techniques that prevented Imperial forces from becoming isolated or surrounded by enemy counterattacks. The coordination between Space Marine legions and Imperial Army forces during major campaigns required careful planning and communication protocols that respected the operational independence of both forces while maximizing their combined effectiveness. The presence of Primarchs as overall campaign commanders created command structures that could coordinate the diverse capabilities of different force types while maintaining the tactical flexibility required for complex multi-phase operations. Joint planning sessions between Legion commanders and Imperial Army staff officers established clear divisions of responsibility that prevented operational conflicts while ensuring comprehensive coverage of campaign objectives. Space Marine forces typically received assignments that emphasized their shock assault capabilities and elite training, while Imperial Army units assumed responsibility for holding captured territory and maintaining the logistics networks that sustained extended operations. The coordination between these different operational approaches required sophisticated planning that addressed the unique requirements and capabilities of each force type. The integration of Mechanicum forces added additional complexity to joint operations, as tech priests and their servitor armies operated under different command structures while providing essential technical support for complex operations. Mechanicum units typically focused on objectives that required specialized technical expertise, such as the capture of enemy production facilities or the neutralization of sophisticated defensive systems. Their coordination with conventional Imperial forces required liaison officers who understood both military operations and Mechanicum technical procedures. Combined arms operations during major campaigns demonstrated the Imperial Army's maturation into a sophisticated military force capable of coordinating diverse unit types across multiple operational environments simultaneously. The systematic integration of infantry, armor, artillery, and air support created tactical capabilities that exceeded the sum of individual unit contributions, while maintaining the flexibility required for adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. The schism that tore through the Imperial Army following the massacre at Istvan III created fractures that extended far beyond simple military reorganization, fundamentally altering the nature of humanity's greatest military force and transforming loyal soldiers into bitter enemies overnight. The systematic purging of loyalist elements within traitor regiments began even before Horus openly declared his rebellion, as corrupt officers identified through careful surveillance eliminated potential threats to their unit's allegiance to the Warmaster. These initial purges often took place during routine training exercises or deployment preparations, with loyal soldiers finding themselves isolated and overwhelmed by their former comrades who had already embraced the promise of chaos. The speed with which some Imperial Army units declared for Horus demonstrated the extent of corruption that had already taken root within the military hierarchy during the years preceding open rebellion. Entire regiments that had fought alongside the Sons of Horus during previous campaigns found their loyalty to their Primarch superseding their oaths to the Emperor, their officers having been gradually subverted through promises of power and glory that appealed to military ambition. The 63rd Expeditionary Fleet's army contingents declared for the Warmaster within hours of receiving word from Istvan, their commanders having already prepared lists of loyalist personnel for immediate elimination. The Juran Dragoons exemplified the tragic division that occurred within individual regiments as the heresy unfolded. This mechanized regiment had served with distinction during the Ulanor campaign, their armored formations earning commendations for tactical excellence and unwavering loyalty to Imperial ideals. However, extended deployment alongside traitor legions had exposed their officers to corrupting influences that gradually undermined their dedication to the Emperor. When the regiment's colonel openly declared for Horus, nearly half the unit's personnel refused to follow, leading to a brutal internal conflict that destroyed the Dragoons as an effective fighting force within a matter of days. The fragmentation of Imperial Army units created immediate operational challenges for both loyalist and traitor forces, as the reliability of conventional military formations became increasingly uncertain. Loyalist commanders found themselves unable to trust units that had previously served with distinction, while traitor forces struggled to maintain discipline among newly converted regiments whose commitment to the rebellion remained questionable. The systematic purging of suspected loyalist elements within traitor armies consumed significant resources and manpower that might otherwise have been directed toward military operations against Imperial forces. Intelligence networks that had previously coordinated Imperial Army operations across multiple sectors became weapons of internal warfare, as both sides attempted to identify enemy sympathizers within their own ranks. Loyalist intelligence officers worked to establish communication with isolated loyal units trapped behind traitor lines, while their counterparts in rebellious forces sought to identify and eliminate potential security threats. The breakdown of trusted communication channels forced commanders to rely increasingly on personal relationships and direct observation to verify the loyalty of their subordinates. The Battle of Talorn emerged from strategic necessity rather than tactical preference, as both loyalist and traitor forces recognized the critical importance of the planet's industrial capacity for sustaining extended military operations. Talorn's vast manufactorums had supplied armored vehicles and heavy equipment to Imperial Army formations throughout the Great Crusade, their production lines capable of equipping entire armored corps with standardized vehicles and weapon systems. The planet's strategic value made it an inevitable target for traitor forces seeking to deny these resources to loyalist armies while securing them for their own use. The initial Iron Warriors' assault on Talorn demonstrated the lengths to which traitor forces would go to achieve their objectives, as virus bombs deployed from orbit transformed the planet's surface into a poisoned wasteland where only the most heavily protected forces could operate effectively. The systematic destruction of Talorn's biosphere eliminated the civilian population while creating environmental conditions that favored mechanized warfare over conventional infantry operations. This deliberate ecological devastation marked a fundamental shift in the conduct of the Civil War, as traitor forces abandoned any pretense of preserving Imperial infrastructure or populations. Imperial Army forces defending Talorn adapted their tactics to the hellish conditions created by the virus bombing, with entire regiments operating from sealed vehicles and underground bunkers that provided protection against the contaminated atmosphere. The Talorn Desert Raiders, fighting on their transformed homeworld, demonstrated remarkable resilience as they modified their traditional hit and run tactics for the new environment. Their intimate knowledge of local terrain proved invaluable despite the ecological destruction, as underground water sources and hidden supply caches enabled sustained resistance operations. The scale of armored warfare on Talorn exceeded any previous engagement in human history, with thousands of tanks and armored vehicles maneuvering across continental battlefields in campaigns that lasted for months without decisive resolution. Loyalist forces employed massed formations of Leman Russ battle tanks supported by Baneblade super heavies, their concentrated firepower capable of breaking through enemy defensive lines when properly coordinated. Traitor armies countered with their own armored formations, supplemented by captured Imperial equipment and newly manufactured vehicles from corrupted Forge worlds. The logistical challenges of sustaining armored operations on Talorn's poisoned surface required innovative solutions that pushed Imperial Army supply systems to their absolute limits. Fuel and ammunition consumption rates during major tank battles exceeded peacetime projections by orders of magnitude, while the hostile environment made routine maintenance operations extremely difficult and dangerous. Supply convoys traveling across the planet's surface required heavy escort forces to protect against enemy interdiction, while underground supply depots became critical strategic objectives that both sides fought desperately to control. Tank crews operating on Talorn endured conditions that tested human endurance beyond normal limits, with sealed vehicle compartments becoming stifling prisons during extended operations in the contaminated environment. The psychological strain of continuous combat in enclosed spaces took a severe toll on crew effectiveness, while the constant threat of environmental contamination created additional stress that affected tactical decision-making. Medical facilities established in underground bunkers treated casualties suffering from both combat injuries and exposure to the planet's toxic atmosphere. The emergence of chaos cults within Imperial Army formations represented one of the most insidious threats facing loyalist commanders during the Heresy, as corruption spread through seemingly loyal units without obvious external signs until it was too late to prevent. These cults typically began with small groups of soldiers who had been exposed to chaos influence during previous campaigns, their gradual conversion of fellow troops creating networks of corruption that could remain hidden for months or years before revealing themselves. The 12th Terran Armored Regiment's fall to chaos corruption demonstrated how quickly and completely loyal units could be subverted when exposed to the insidious influence of the ruinous powers. This elite formation had served with distinction during the conquest of the Oresian technocracy, their disciplined professionalism and tactical excellence earning them assignment to Terra's outer system defenses. However, extended exposure to captured Oresian technology that contained subtle chaos influences gradually corrupted key personnel within the regiment's command structure. The corruption manifested first among the regiment's technical specialists, who had worked most closely with the contaminated equipment during post-battle analysis and integration procedures. These individuals began experiencing visions and dreams that they initially dismissed as stress-related hallucinations, but which gradually evolved into direct communication with demonic entities that promised enhanced understanding and power. The affected personnel carefully concealed their transformation while working to spread the corruption to other members of their units through seemingly innocent conversations and shared experiences. The systematic spread of chaos corruption through Imperial Army units followed predictable patterns that loyalist intelligence services learned to recognize and counter, though often too late to prevent significant damage. Corrupted individuals typically targeted personnel who displayed signs of ambition, resentment, or psychological vulnerability that made them susceptible to the promises offered by the dark gods. The gradual nature of this corruption made it particularly difficult to detect until it had already established firm roots within affected units. Religious observances within Imperial Army formations became battlegrounds between loyalist chaplains and corrupted personnel seeking to introduce heretical practices disguised as legitimate imperial worship. Traditional ceremonies honoring the emperor gradually incorporated subtle changes that seemed innocuous, but actually served to weaken spiritual defenses against chaos influence. The replacement of standard imperial prayers with modified versions that contained hidden blasphemies created opportunities for demonic influence to take root among unsuspecting soldiers. The discovery of chaos corruption within military units required immediate and decisive action that often proved as destructive to unit cohesion as the corruption itself. Loyalist commanders faced impossible choices between preserving unit strength and eliminating potential threats, with purges of suspected cultists sometimes removing loyal personnel who had been falsely accused. The paranoia and suspicion generated by anti-corruption efforts created additional stress within military formations already strained by the demands of civil war. The Siege of Terra represented the ultimate test of Imperial Army loyalty and capability, as millions of soldiers prepared to defend humanity's birthworld against the combined forces of 9 traitor legions and their corrupted auxiliaries. The scale of defensive preparations required the coordination of resources from across the remaining loyal sectors of the Imperium, with supply convoys risking destruction by traitor forces to deliver essential equipment and reinforcements to Terra's defenders. Imperial Army formations assigned to Terra's defense included some of the most experienced and reliable units remaining loyal to the Emperor, their selection based on proven combat effectiveness and unquestioned loyalty, despite the paranoia that pervaded Imperial command structures. The Lucifer Blacks, elite void warfare specialists, prepared to defend the Imperial Palace's outer approaches alongside Cadian shock troops, whose disciplined firepower would prove essential during the siege's most critical phases. Catachan jungle fighters adapted their stealth and survival skills to the urban warfare environment that would characterize much of the fighting within Terra's sprawling hive cities. The construction of defensive positions throughout the Sol system required engineering efforts that dwarfed even the massive fortification projects undertaken during the Great Crusade's peak years. Imperial Army engineer regiments worked alongside Mechanicum construction teams to create layered defensive systems that could channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones while providing protected positions for defending troops. The systematic preparation of Terra's surface for siege warfare transformed entire continents into fortress complexes connected by underground supply tunnels and communication networks. Artillery emplacements positioned throughout Terra's defensive perimeter represented the concentrated firepower of dozens of Imperial Army artillery regiments, their guns ranging from standard Earthshaker cannons to massive fortress guns capable of engaging targets in low orbit. The coordination of these defensive fires required sophisticated command and control systems that could maintain communication despite the electromagnetic interference generated by orbital combat and enemy jamming efforts. Forward observers positioned in advanced defensive positions provided targeting information that enabled precision strikes against specific enemy formations advancing toward Imperial lines. The heroic sacrifice of Alanius Persson during the final assault on the Imperial Palace exemplified the courage and dedication displayed by countless Imperial Army soldiers throughout the siege, as ordinary humans faced superhuman enemies in defense of their species' future. Persson, a veteran guardsman whose service record stretched back to the earliest days of the Great Crusade, found himself in the Emperor's presence during Horus's final confrontation with his father. His decision to interpose himself between the Warmaster and the Emperor, knowing that his death was certain, but hoping to provide even a moment's distraction, represented the finest traditions of Imperial military service. The psychological impact of witnessing ordinary soldiers willingly sacrifice themselves against impossible odds provided inspiration that sustained Imperial Army morale throughout the siege's darkest moments. Stories of individual heroism spread through defensive positions despite official communication blackouts, creating legends that reinforced unit cohesion and determination to continue fighting regardless of the tactical situation. These accounts of courage under fire became rallying points that helped maintain discipline when conventional military authority structures broke down under the stress of continuous combat. Medical facilities throughout Terra's defensive zones treated casualties on a scale that exceeded the capacity of existing Imperial Army medical services, with field hospitals processing thousands of wounded soldiers daily during the siege's most intense phases. Medical personnel worked under constant threat of enemy bombardment, while dealing with injuries that ranged from conventional combat wounds to the horrific damage inflicted by chaos-corrupted weapons. The shortage of medical supplies and qualified personnel forced difficult decisions about treatment priorities that tested the moral foundations of Imperial military medicine. The evacuation of wounded personnel from forward defensive positions required coordination between medical units and combat formations that often proved impossible to maintain during intense fighting. Casualty collection points established behind the main defensive lines became targets for enemy artillery as traitor forces sought to maximize Imperial losses through systematic destruction of medical facilities. The courage displayed by medical personnel who continued their work despite these threats provided another example of the dedication that characterized Imperial Army service during humanity's darkest hour. Supply lines connecting Terra's defensive positions to underground storage facilities became lifelines that sustained the siege's defenders despite constant enemy interdiction efforts. Imperial Army logistics personnel worked under extremely dangerous conditions to maintain the flow of ammunition, food, and medical supplies to forward positions, their convoys traveling through underground tunnels that offered protection from orbital bombardment but remained vulnerable to infiltration by enemy forces. The breakdown of normal supply procedures during the siege's later phases forced individual units to become increasingly self-sufficient, with soldiers scavenging equipment and ammunition from battlefield casualties to maintain their fighting capability. This improvised logistics system reflected the adaptability and resourcefulness that had made the Imperial Army effective during the Great Crusade, as soldiers applied their training and experience to overcome seemingly impossible challenges through determination and ingenuity. The aftermath of the Horus Heresy necessitated fundamental reforms to the imperial military structure that would prevent any future rebellion from achieving the devastating scale of the civil war that had nearly destroyed the Imperium. The Emperor's incapacitation aboard the Golden Throne left the task of military reorganization to the newly established High Lords of Terra, whose first priority involved dismantling the massive unified command structure that had enabled traitor forces to coordinate across multiple sectors simultaneously. The sheer scale of betrayal witnessed during the heresy, where entire expedition fleets had turned against the Imperium overnight, demonstrated the catastrophic vulnerabilities inherent in concentrating military authority under single commanders who controlled both naval and ground forces. Robute Guilliman's Codex Astartes provided the philosophical foundation for these sweeping reforms, its principles of divided authority and limited unit size extending beyond the Space Marine legions to encompass the broader imperial military establishment. The Primarch's analysis of the heresies causes identified the concentration of power in individual commanders as a critical factor that had enabled the rebellion's rapid spread across multiple sectors. His recommendations emphasized the importance of creating institutional barriers that would make future large-scale betrayals logistically impossible to coordinate and sustain. The breaking apart of the Imperial Army began with the systematic dissolution of expedition fleet command structures that had integrated naval and ground forces under unified leadership. These commands, which had proven so effective during the Great Crusade's expansion phase, represented unacceptable concentrations of military power in the post-heresy environment. The process of separating these forces required careful attention to maintaining operational capability while implementing new command structures that would prevent future coordination between potentially rebellious elements. Naval assets previously assigned to expedition fleets were reassigned to newly independent Imperial Navy commands that reported directly to the Segmentum Solar headquarters on Terra. This reorganization created clear separation between void warfare capabilities and ground-based military forces, ensuring that no single commander could control both the ships necessary for interstellar transport and the armies required for planetary conquest. The Imperial Navy assumed exclusive responsibility for void combat operations, orbital bombardment support, and the transportation of Imperial Guard regiments between different theaters of operation. Ground-based Imperial Army formations underwent simultaneous reorganization into smaller, more manageable units that could be deployed independently without requiring the massive logistical infrastructure that had supported expedition fleet operations. The new regimental structure emphasized standardization and interoperability while deliberately limiting the size and scope of individual unit commands. No single officer would again control the millions of soldiers that had served under expedition fleet commanders during the Great Crusade, reducing the potential impact of any future betrayal. The establishment of the reformed Adeptus Militarum represented the most significant administrative change in imperial military organization since the creation of the original Imperial Army. This massive bureaucratic apparatus assumed responsibility for all aspects of Imperial Guard administration, from recruitment quotas and training standards to equipment procurement and logistics coordination. The Adeptus Militarum's centralized authority ensured consistent application of military policy across the Imperium while creating multiple layers of oversight that would detect and prevent corruption before it could spread to operational units. The Munitorum's headquarters complex, constructed within the Himalayan mountains near the ruins of the old Imperial Army high command facilities, housed thousands of administrators whose work maintained the vast military machine that defended the Imperium. These facilities incorporated lessons learned during the Heresy about the vulnerability of centralized command structures, with multiple redundant communication systems and hardened bunkers that could maintain operations even under direct assault. The complex's deep underground levels contained strategic planning centers equipped with hololithic displays that presented information from across the galaxy, though the data often arrived weeks or months after the events it depicted. Administrative divisions within the Adeptus Munitorum reflected the complex requirements of coordinating military operations across a galaxy-spanning empire. The Adeptus Exacta maintained detailed records of every Imperial Guard regiment, tracking their current strength, equipment status, and deployment history through sophisticated data management systems that could identify units available for specific mission requirements. These records enabled strategic planners to allocate forces efficiently while ensuring that no single region became dangerously depleted of defensive assets. The Officio Praefectus emerged as a critical component of the new military structure, providing political oversight that would prevent the ideological corruption that had facilitated the heresies spread through imperial forces. Commissars assigned to Imperial Guard regiments served as the Emperor's direct representatives, their authority superseding that of regimental commanders when questions of loyalty or doctrine arose. The commissariat's training facilities on Schola Progenium worlds produced officers whose unwavering dedication to imperial ideals provided insurance against the gradual corruption that had subverted so many units during the Civil War. The implementation of standardized regimental structures required extensive coordination between different worlds and military traditions that had developed distinct organizational approaches during the Great Crusade. The new regulations specified exact unit compositions, command hierarchies, and equipment loadouts that would ensure interoperability between regiments from different recruiting worlds. These standards represented compromises between military effectiveness and administrative efficiency, creating formations that could function effectively together while remaining small enough to prevent dangerous concentrations of power. Infantry regiments under the new structure typically contained between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers organized into multiple battalions, each capable of independent operations, but lacking the heavy equipment and specialized support units that would enable extended autonomous campaigns. This deliberate limitation ensured that individual regiments remained dependent on higher command authority for major operations, while maintaining sufficient capability for routine security duties and limited combat operations. The standardized organization facilitated rapid reinforcement and replacement procedures that could maintain unit strength despite combat losses. Armored regiments received similar organizational constraints that limited their independent operational capability while preserving their effectiveness as specialized formations. Tank companies within these regiments operated standardized vehicle types with predetermined equipment loadouts that simplified maintenance and logistics requirements. The separation of armored assets from infantry formations created additional command complexity that required coordination between different regiment types during combined operations, but this inconvenience was considered acceptable given the security benefits of preventing single commanders from controlling complete combined arms formations. Artillery regiments assumed responsibility for providing fire support to infantry and armored formations through carefully coordinated fire missions that required approval from multiple command levels. The new procedures for requesting and approving artillery support created deliberate delays that prevented rapid tactical responses, but also ensured that devastating firepower could not be employed without proper authorization. These restrictions reflected lessons learned during the Heresy about the potential for corrupted officers to turn Imperial artillery against loyal forces. The integration of former Imperial Army personnel into the new regimental structure required extensive screening procedures designed to identify individuals whose loyalty might have been compromised during the heresy. Veterans who had served in units that declared for the traitors faced particularly intensive investigation, regardless of their personal conduct during the rebellion. Many experienced soldiers found their careers ended by association with treasonous formations, while others underwent extended probationary periods before receiving assignment to active units. Recruitment procedures for the newly designated Imperial Guard incorporated lessons learned about the vulnerability of military formations to ideological corruption. The new protocols emphasized the importance of identifying potential recruits whose psychological profiles indicated strong resistance to external influence and unwavering loyalty to imperial authority. Recruitment officers received training in recognizing signs of susceptibility to corruption, while standardized psychological evaluations became mandatory components of the enlistment process. Training establishments throughout the Imperium underwent reorganization to implement standardized curricula that emphasized loyalty and obedience alongside military competence. The new training programs incorporated extensive political education that reinforced imperial doctrine while identifying recruits who might prove susceptible to heretical influences. Drill instructors received special training in recognizing and reporting signs of ideological deviation among their trainees, creating multiple layers of oversight that would prevent corrupted individuals from advancing to positions of authority. The standardization of Imperial Guard doctrine required extensive analysis of combat experiences from both the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy to identify tactical approaches that maximized effectiveness while minimizing the risk of units operating beyond proper command oversight. The resulting doctrine emphasized defensive operations and coordinated attacks that required approval from multiple command levels, deliberately sacrificing some tactical flexibility to ensure that Imperial Guard formations could not be easily turned against the Imperium by corrupted commanders. Defensive tactics received particular emphasis in the new doctrine, as the heresy had demonstrated the critical importance of holding strategic positions against superior enemy forces. Imperial Guard units trained extensively in the construction and defense of fortified positions, their procedures designed to maximize the effectiveness of limited forces against numerically superior attackers. These defensive techniques incorporated lessons learned during the Siege of Terra about the importance of layered defensive systems that could channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. Offensive operations under the new doctrine required extensive coordination between multiple regiment types and command levels, creating deliberate complexity that would prevent unauthorized attacks while ensuring that properly planned operations received adequate support. The approval process for major offensive operations involved multiple staff reviews and resource allocation procedures that could take weeks to complete, but this delay was considered acceptable given the security benefits of preventing rogue commanders from launching unauthorized campaigns. Combined arms coordination became increasingly complex under the new organizational structure, as different regiment types operated under separate command hierarchies that required formal coordination procedures for joint operations. Infantry commanders could no longer directly control attached armor or artillery assets, instead requiring formal requests for support that moved through established bureaucratic channels. This system created inefficiencies that reduced tactical responsiveness, but provided multiple opportunities to detect and prevent unauthorized operations. The role of Space Marine chapters in supporting Imperial Guard operations changed significantly following the implementation of the new military structure. The Codex Astartes had broken the legions into smaller chapters that could provide specialized support to Imperial Guard formations without creating the dangerous concentrations of power that had characterized expedition fleet operations. Chapter commanders maintained independence from Imperial Guard command structures while providing coordination through formal liaison procedures that respected the authority of both organizations. Coordination between Imperial Guard and Space Marine forces required new protocols that addressed the organizational changes implemented following the heresy. Joint planning sessions became more complex as multiple command hierarchies required representation, while operational security concerns limited the sharing of sensitive information between different organizations. These restrictions created additional challenges for combined operations, but were considered necessary safeguards against the type of widespread coordination that had enabled the heresy's devastating effectiveness. The establishment of sector command headquarters throughout the Imperium created regional coordination centers that could manage Imperial Guard operations across multiple star systems while maintaining appropriate oversight of local commanders. These facilities incorporated lessons learned about the vulnerability of centralized command structures, with multiple redundant systems and hardened facilities that could maintain operations despite enemy action. Sector commanders received authority over Imperial Guard regiments within their areas of responsibility, but remained subject to oversight from the Adeptus Militarum and other High Lords of Terra. Supply chain management under the new structure became significantly more complex as the integration of naval and ground forces logistics ended with the separation of the Imperial Navy and Imperial Guard. The Adeptus Militarum assumed responsibility for coordinating between different service branches to ensure that Imperial Guard regiments received necessary transportation and supply support. This coordination required extensive bureaucratic procedures that created delays and inefficiencies, but provided multiple oversight opportunities that would detect unauthorized resource allocation. The transformation of recruitment practices reflected broader changes in Imperial society following the heresy, as the traumatic experience of civil war created lasting suspicion of individual ambition and initiative. The new recruitment procedures emphasized conformity and obedience over individual excellence, seeking candidates who would follow orders without question rather than those who might display dangerous independence. This approach produced more reliable soldiers, but potentially reduced the overall quality of military leadership as creative thinking became viewed with suspicion. Quality control measures implemented across Imperial Guard training facilities ensured consistent application of new doctrine and organizational standards despite the diversity of recruiting worlds and local military traditions. Regular inspections by Adeptus Militarum assessment teams evaluated facility performance while identifying deviations from established procedures that might indicate corruption or unauthorized innovation. These inspections created additional bureaucratic oversight that consumed significant resources, but provided essential verification of compliance with reformed military standards. The vast expanse of the Great Crusade created inevitable divergences in fighting doctrine and military culture as Imperial Army regiments adapted to local conditions and integrated the martial traditions of newly compliant worlds. These variations emerged from practical necessity rather than deliberate policy, as commanders operating across galactic distances found themselves forced to modify standard Imperial doctrine to address unique environmental challenges, enemy types, and available resources. The resulting diversity of military approaches created a tapestry of specialized capabilities that enhanced the Imperial Army's overall effectiveness, while occasionally creating friction between units with vastly different operational philosophies. Terra-born regiments maintained the closest adherence to orthodox Imperial Army doctrine, their training conducted at the primary military academies established during the Unification Wars and refined throughout the early decades of galactic conquest. These formations drew their personnel from the techno-barbarian tribes that had been integrated into Imperial society following their defeat by the Emperor's forces, creating military units whose loyalty had been tested through generations of service to the Master of Mankind. Terran regiments typically displayed exceptional discipline and standardized equipment loadouts that reflected their access to the finest manufacturing facilities within the Sol system. The 1st Terran Armored Regiment exemplified the characteristics that distinguished Terra-born formations from their counterparts recruited elsewhere in the galaxy. Their crimson and gold uniforms bore the personal heraldry of the Emperor, alongside regimental honors dating back to the conquest of the Ural's techno-barbarian kingdoms. The regiment's Leman Russ battle tanks maintained pristine condition despite years of active campaigning, their crews demonstrating the meticulous maintenance procedures taught at Terran military academies. Combat doctrine emphasized coordinated advances with precise fire control that maximized the effectiveness of their standardized equipment while minimizing ammunition expenditure. Terran infantry formations displayed similar attention to standardization and procedure, their Laws gun volleys delivered with parade ground precision that translated into devastating effectiveness against enemy formations. The 3rd Terran Shock Regiment's purple and white uniforms remained immaculate even during extended field operations, their soldiers maintaining equipment standards that reflected the pride and professionalism instilled during training on humanity's birthworld. Their tactical approaches favored methodical advances supported by coordinated artillery fire, eschewing the improvised tactics that characterized many regiments recruited from frontier worlds. The integration of newly compliant worlds into the Imperial military structure created opportunities to harness diverse martial traditions that had developed during humanity's long isolation throughout the Age of Strife. These worlds brought military knowledge that had evolved independently for millennia, creating unique approaches to warfare that could complement standard Imperial doctrine when properly integrated. The challenge for Imperial commanders lay in preserving the tactical advantages offered by these specialized traditions, while ensuring that units from different worlds could coordinate effectively during joint operations. Chagorian regiments demonstrated remarkable proficiency in rapid maneuver warfare that reflected their homeworld's nomadic culture and emphasis on speed over heavy equipment. Their light cavalry traditions translated effectively to mechanized warfare, with Chagorian tank crews displaying exceptional skill in hit and run tactics that maximized mobility while avoiding direct confrontation with superior enemy forces. The white and red heraldry of Chagorian formations became synonymous with lightning-fast advances that could exploit enemy weaknesses before conventional forces could respond to changing tactical situations. The adaptation of traditional Chagorian hunting techniques to military reconnaissance created some of the Imperial Army's most effective scouting units. Chagorian reconnaissance squadrons operated far ahead of main Imperial forces, their intimate understanding of terrain analysis and enemy movement patterns enabling them to provide detailed intelligence that facilitated successful operations by follow-on formations. Their ability to survive independently in hostile territory for extended periods made them invaluable assets during campaigns where conventional supply lines remained vulnerable to enemy interdiction. Fenrisian auxiliary units brought expertise in cold weather operations and survival techniques that proved essential during campaigns on ice worlds and other hostile environments. Their traditional emphasis on individual initiative and small unit tactics created formations that could operate effectively without constant supervision, though their independent nature sometimes created friction with commanders accustomed to more disciplined formations. Fenrisian warriors adapted their traditional weapons and hunting techniques to Imperial military equipment, creating unique tactical approaches that combined ancient wisdom with advanced technology. The fierce loyalty that characterized Fenrisian culture translated into exceptional unit cohesion and determination during combat operations. Fenrisian regiments rarely broke under pressure, their warriors viewing retreat as personal dishonor that reflected poorly on their clan affiliations. This psychological resilience made them particularly valuable during defensive operations and siege warfare, where their refusal to abandon positions could provide critical time for reinforcements to arrive or for strategic withdrawals to be completed successfully. Among the most elite formations within the Imperial Army, the Lucifer Blacks represented the pinnacle of void warfare specialization and close-quarters combat expertise. These units traced their origins to the boarding parties and ship security forces that had served aboard Imperial vessels during the earliest phases of the Great Crusade. Their selection criteria and training regimens producing soldiers capable of operating effectively in the confined spaces and zero-gravity environments that characterized void warfare. The distinctive black carapace armor worn by Lucifer Blacks incorporated environmental sealing and magnetic boot systems that enabled combat operations in vacuum conditions. Lucifer Black training emphasized close-quarters combat techniques optimized for the narrow corridors and cramped compartments found aboard starships and orbital installations. Their weapons loadouts typically included compact lasguns with folding stocks, combat shotguns loaded with specialized ammunition designed to minimize hull penetration risks, and an array of melee weapons ranging from power swords to mono-edged combat knives. The psychological conditioning required for void warfare operations created soldiers who remained calm and effective in environments that would paralyze conventional infantry formations. The selection process for Lucifer Black units identified candidates with exceptional physical conditioning and psychological stability, as void warfare operations demanded soldiers capable of functioning effectively despite the disorientation and claustrophobia that affected many individuals during zero-gravity combat. Training programs incorporated extensive exposure to simulated void conditions, with recruits spending weeks aboard specially configured training vessels that replicated the environmental challenges of actual combat operations. Only a small percentage of candidates successfully completed the rigorous selection process, creating elite formations whose capabilities far exceeded those of standard infantry regiments. Lucifer Black tactical doctrine emphasized rapid assault techniques designed to seize control of enemy vessels or installations before defenders could organize effective resistance. Boarding operations typically began with breaching charges or cutting tools that created entry points in enemy hulls, followed by immediate assault through the breach points by teams equipped for close-quarters combat. The speed and violence of these assaults often overwhelmed enemy defenders before they could adapt to the sudden transition from void combat to infantry fighting within their own vessels. The integration of specialized assault troops from various compliance worlds created additional elite formations that addressed specific tactical requirements beyond the capabilities of standard line regiments. These units typically drew their personnel from worlds with warrior cultures that emphasized individual combat prowess and aggressive tactics, their pre-existing martial traditions providing foundations for specialized military training. The diversity of these formations reflected the varied martial cultures encountered during the Great Crusade's expansion across human space. Chthonian assault units brought expertise in tunnel fighting and underground warfare that proved invaluable during siege operations and urban combat scenarios. Their homeworld's extensive mining operations had created a population familiar with confined spaces and dangerous working conditions, skills that translated effectively to military applications. Chthonian formations specialized in breaching operations and the reduction of fortified positions, their techniques for explosive placement and structural demolition enabling them to create entry points in even heavily defended installations. The psychological conditioning that enabled Chthonians to work in dangerous underground environments also made them effective shock troops capable of maintaining unit cohesion despite heavy casualties. Their cultural acceptance of risk and violence created soldiers who could execute dangerous assault missions that might cause other formations to hesitate or break under pressure. Chthonian assault companies often spearheaded major offensive operations, their willingness to accept casualties in exchange for tactical objectives making them valuable assets during critical phases of important campaigns. Human auxiliaries represented a controversial but militarily significant component of Imperial Army organization, as these genetically divergent human populations possessed physical capabilities that exceeded baseline human norms in specific areas. The integration of human units required careful consideration of their unique characteristics and limitations, while addressing the social tensions that their presence sometimes created within predominantly baseline human formations. Imperial military doctrine recognized the tactical advantages offered by abhuman auxiliaries, while implementing procedures designed to maximize their effectiveness within the broader command structure. Oghren auxiliary units provided heavy infantry capabilities that no baseline human formation could match, their massive physical strength and natural resilience making them ideal for assault operations and defensive positions that required soldiers capable of absorbing tremendous punishment while continuing to fight effectively. Standing nearly 3 meters tall and possessing strength that allowed them to carry weapons and equipment that would overwhelm normal soldiers, Oghren units filled tactical roles that would otherwise require specialized equipment or multiple soldiers to accomplish. The intellectual limitations that characterized most Oghren populations required specialized training approaches that emphasized repetitive drill and simple command structures rather than complex tactical instruction. Oghren units typically operated under the direct supervision of baseline human officers who provided tactical direction, while allowing the abhumans to focus on the straightforward application of overwhelming physical force. This command arrangement proved effective in combat situations where Oghren units could be directed against specific objectives without requiring complex maneuvering or independent decision-making. Oghren equipment reflected their unique physical characteristics and tactical roles, with specially manufactured weapons designed to accommodate their massive hands and exceptional strength. Ripper guns provided automatic fire capability with ammunition capacity sufficient for sustained combat operations, while Oghren pattern lasguns incorporated reinforced construction that could withstand the rough handling inevitable when operated by soldiers whose strength could easily damage equipment designed for baseline humans. Specialized carapace armor protected vital areas while allowing the freedom of movement necessary for effective combat performance. The psychological impact of Oghren units on enemy forces often exceeded their direct military contribution, as the sight of massive armored figures advancing under fire could break enemy morale even when tactical conditions favored the defenders. Enemy soldiers accustomed to fighting baseline humans found themselves psychologically unprepared for opponents who could absorb multiple hits while continuing their advance, creating panic that disrupted defensive coordination and created opportunities for supporting Imperial forces to exploit. Rattling auxiliary units provided reconnaissance and sniper capabilities that complemented the heavy assault role filled by Oghren formations. These diminutive abhumans possessed exceptional marksmanship skills and natural stealth abilities that made them ideal for long-range engagement and intelligence-gathering operations. Rattling snipers could eliminate key enemy personnel at ranges that exceeded the capabilities of standard Imperial marksmen, their patient approach to target selection and engagement creating tactical advantages that influenced entire battlefield situations. The social characteristics of rattling populations created unique challenges for military integration, as their civilian culture emphasized comfort and personal satisfaction over the martial virtues prized by Imperial military tradition. Rattling units required specialized leadership approaches that motivated their performance through appeals to unit pride and personal recognition rather than the harsh discipline that proved effective with other formation types. Successful integration of rattling auxiliaries typically involved commanders who understood their cultural preferences while maintaining the military standards necessary for effective combat performance. Rattling field kitchens became legendary throughout the Imperial Army for producing meals that far exceeded standard military rations in both quality and variety. This seemingly minor contribution actually provided significant morale benefits that enhanced overall unit effectiveness, as soldiers who ate well maintained better health and psychological condition during extended campaigns. The culinary skills that rattlings brought to military service created unexpected diplomatic opportunities when their cooking helped establish positive relationships with local populations on newly compliant worlds. The adaptation of local military traditions into Imperial Army doctrine required careful analysis to identify practices that enhanced combat effectiveness while remaining compatible with broader Imperial military culture. This process involved extensive consultation between Imperial commanders and local military leaders to understand the tactical principles underlying traditional practices and determine how they might be integrated into standardized Imperial procedures. Successful adaptations typically preserve the tactical advantages of local traditions while modifying their implementation to ensure compatibility with Imperial equipment and command structures. Feudal world military traditions often emphasized personal combat prowess and individual initiative that could be channeled into effective small unit tactics when properly integrated with Imperial doctrine. Knight-errant traditions from various feudal worlds created formations that combined traditional concepts of honor and personal courage with modern weapons and equipment, producing units whose morale and determination often exceeded that of formations recruited from more technologically advanced but less martial cultures. The integration of traditional weapons alongside Imperial standard equipment created unique tactical capabilities that reflected local expertise while maintaining compatibility with broader Imperial logistics networks. Feudal world regiments might incorporate traditional bladed weapons for close quarters combat while employing standard Imperial firearms for ranged engagement, creating formations that could adapt their tactics to specific combat situations. These hybrid approaches often proved particularly effective during urban warfare and boarding actions, where combat ranges varied dramatically within single engagements. Ceremonial traditions from various compliance worlds became integrated into Imperial Army culture through the gradual adoption of practices that enhanced unit cohesion and morale without compromising military effectiveness. Traditional victory celebrations, memorial services for fallen comrades, and pre-battle rituals provided psychological benefits that strengthened unit bonds while preserving connections to homeworld cultures that motivated individual soldiers. The diversity of these traditions created rich military cultures that enhanced the Imperial Army's appeal to potential recruits while maintaining the standardization necessary for effective coordination between different formations. The systematic expansion of the Great Crusade brought Imperial Army forces into contact with a bewildering array of alien civilizations, each presenting unique tactical challenges that required rapid adaptation of standard Imperial doctrine. The Emperor's xenophobic policies demanded the complete eradication of non-human intelligence wherever it was encountered, transforming every first contact scenario into a military operation that prioritized overwhelming force over diplomatic solutions. Imperial Army commanders learned to approach alien encounters with predetermined assumptions about hostile intent, their standing orders emphasizing the complete destruction of Xenos populations and infrastructure to prevent any possibility of future resistance or retaliation. The development of specialized anti-Xenos equipment began during the earliest phases of galactic expansion, as Imperial forces encountered alien technologies and biological adaptations that rendered standard weapons and tactics less effective than anticipated. Mechanicum Tech adepts assigned to expedition fleets conducted detailed analysis of captured alien specimens and equipment, their research providing the foundation for equipment modifications and tactical innovations that enhanced Imperial effectiveness against non-human enemies. These adaptations ranged from simple ammunition modifications to complex weapon systems designed specifically for use against particular alien physiologies. Orc empires represented the most widespread and persistent Xenos threat encountered during the Great Crusade, their crude but effective technology and innate aggression creating enemies that could match Imperial forces in both numerical strength and tactical adaptability. The Greenskin menace had spread across thousands of star systems during humanity's isolation throughout the Age of Strife, their rapid reproduction rates and scavenging capabilities enabling them to establish self-sustaining populations on virtually any world capable of supporting life. Imperial Army formations learned to expect prolonged campaigns when engaging Orc forces, as the aliens' resilience and resourcefulness made quick victories extremely difficult to achieve. The Battle of Rust demonstrated the challenges inherent in conducting anti-Orc operations, as the 47th Expeditionary Fleet encountered a massive greenskin empire that had fortified an entire star system using salvaged Imperial technology dating back to the Dark Age of technology. The Orcs had constructed sprawling fortress cities from the wreckage of ancient human vessels, their ramshackle but effective defenses incorporating weapon systems that could engage Imperial ships at extreme ranges. The initial Imperial assault suffered severe casualties as commanders underestimated the sophistication of Orc defensive preparations, their standard tactics proving inadequate against enemies who had learned to exploit captured Imperial equipment. Imperial Army artillery units faced particular challenges when engaging Orc positions, as greenskin construction methods created defensive structures that absorbed tremendous amounts of punishment without suffering critical damage. Standard high-explosive shells often failed to penetrate the layers of scrap metal and debris that comprised Orc fortifications, while the aliens' ability to rapidly repair battle damage negated many tactical advantages that Imperial forces had achieved through careful preparation. Artillery commanders learned to concentrate their fire on specific structural weak points identified through prolonged observation, their targeting procedures requiring patience and ammunition expenditure that exceeded normal operational parameters. The systematic reduction of Orc strongholds required siege techniques that emphasized sustained pressure over rapid breakthrough operations. Imperial Army engineer regiments developed specialized demolition procedures that could collapse the improvised but effective defensive structures favored by greenskin forces. These techniques involved careful placement of shaped charges at critical structural points, followed by coordinated detonation sequences that brought down entire sections of enemy fortifications. The process required extensive reconnaissance and preparation that exposed engineer teams to significant risk, as Orc defenders proved remarkably effective at identifying and targeting Imperial sappers. Combat operations against Orc forces revealed the importance of maintaining ammunition discipline and fire control, as greenskin psychology responded positively to intense combat that would demoralize human enemies. Orc forces actually became more dangerous when subjected to heavy casualties, their primitive but effective leadership structures adapting quickly to tactical situations, while their innate aggression increased in response to combat stimulation. Imperial Army commanders learned to employ measured applications of firepower designed to eliminate specific Orc units without creating the chaotic combat conditions that enhanced overall greenskin effectiveness. The capture and analysis of Orc technology provided valuable intelligence about alien manufacturing capabilities and tactical preferences, though the crude construction methods employed by greenskin engineers made their equipment unsuitable for Imperial use. Mechanicum specialists studied Orc weapons and vehicles to understand the principles underlying their surprisingly effective designs, their research contributing to improvements in Imperial equipment that addressed weaknesses revealed through combat experience. The aliens' ability to create functional technology from salvaged materials demonstrated engineering approaches that differed fundamentally from human methods while achieving comparable results through entirely different means. Eldar encounters presented entirely different challenges that tested Imperial Army capabilities against enemies whose technological sophistication far exceeded human achievements. These ancient aliens possessed weapons and equipment that seemed to violate physical laws, their graceful but deadly technology creating tactical situations that defied conventional military analysis. Imperial forces typically discovered evidence of Eldar presence only after suffering casualties to weapons that struck without warning from concealed positions, the aliens' superior mobility and stealth capabilities enabling them to control the tempo and location of engagements. The compliance of Tethys illustrated the difficulties inherent in conducting operations against Eldar forces, as the 23rd Expeditionary Fleet discovered an apparently abandoned human colony that showed signs of recent Eldar activity. Initial reconnaissance revealed no immediate alien presence, but Imperial Army units began suffering casualties to precision weapons fire that seemed to originate from empty terrain. The aliens' ability to remain concealed while engaging Imperial forces created a psychological impact that affected unit morale and tactical decision-making, as soldiers found themselves unable to identify or engage enemies who could strike at will. Eldar technology demonstrated capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and physics, their weapons producing effects that seemed impossible given their apparent size and power requirements. Shuriken catapults fired monomolecular discs that could penetrate Imperial armor with ease despite their small projectile size, while Eldar vehicles moved with speed and agility that exceeded the performance of comparable Imperial systems. The aliens' mastery of gravitic manipulation enabled them to ignore terrain obstacles that would halt conventional forces, their skimmers gliding effortlessly over broken ground that would immobilize wheeled or tracked vehicles. Imperial Army tactical doctrine required significant modification when engaging Eldar forces, as standard approaches that emphasized concentrated firepower and coordinated advances proved ineffective against enemies who could avoid engagement at will. Commanders learned to employ dispersed formations that minimized the effectiveness of Eldar precision weapons while creating multiple potential targets that forced the aliens to divide their attention. These modified tactics sacrificed some coordination and mutual support in exchange for reduced vulnerability to the devastating alpha strikes that characterized Eldar combat methods. Anti-Eldar operations required extensive intelligence preparation that attempted to predict alien movement patterns and identify potential ambush sites before Imperial forces entered areas of suspected Eldar activity. Reconnaissance units employed maximum stealth procedures while conducting surveillance operations, their reports providing early warning of alien presence that enabled commanders to modify their tactical approaches accordingly. The challenge lay in gathering useful intelligence about enemies whose superior technology made conventional surveillance techniques largely ineffective. The development of counter-stealth procedures became essential for Imperial forces operating in areas of known Eldar activity, as the aliens' ability to remain hidden while observing Imperial movements created significant tactical disadvantages. Imperial Army units learned to employ random movement patterns and frequent position changes that complicated Eldar targeting procedures, while communication security measures prevented the aliens from intercepting tactical information that might reveal Imperial intentions. These defensive measures reduced operational efficiency, but provided essential protection against enemies who could exploit predictable Imperial behavior. Specialized anti-Xenos ammunition represented one of the most successful adaptations developed for combating alien enemies, as different species required different approaches to achieve effective lethality. Orc physiology demanded high-velocity rounds with maximum penetration power, their robust constitution enabling them to continue fighting despite wounds that would incapacitate human opponents. Standard Imperial ammunition often proved insufficient against greenskin targets, leading to the development of specialized rounds with enhanced stopping power and improved terminal ballistics. Anti-Eldar ammunition emphasized accuracy and armor penetration over raw stopping power, as the aliens' advanced protective systems could deflect or absorb conventional projectiles with minimal effect. Imperial Army units operating in areas of suspected Eldar activity received priority allocation of specialized rounds designed to defeat alien armor systems, though the limited availability of these munitions required careful ammunition discipline to ensure adequate supplies remained available during critical engagements. The logistical challenges of distributing specialized ammunition across multiple theaters created additional complexity for supply officers who had to balance competing demands for limited resources. Flamer weapons proved particularly effective against certain alien species, whose physiological characteristics made them vulnerable to incendiary attack, though their limited range and ammunition capacity restricted their tactical applications. Imperial Army units learned to employ flame weapons as area denial tools that could force alien enemies into predetermined kill zones, where conventional weapons could engage them more effectively. The psychological impact of flame weapons often exceeded their direct military effectiveness, as many alien species demonstrated instinctive fear responses to fire that disrupted their tactical coordination. The coordination between Imperial Army forces and other Imperial institutions during Xenocide campaigns required careful planning to ensure that different organizations could support each other effectively while maintaining their operational independence. The Mechanicum provided technical expertise that proved essential for analyzing alien technology and developing countermeasures, their tech adepts serving as advisors who could interpret alien equipment and suggest tactical approaches based on technical analysis. The relationship between military commanders and Mechanicum specialists required diplomatic skills that balanced military necessity with respect for Mechanicum independence. Space Marine legions typically spearheaded major anti-Xenos operations, their superior training and equipment making them ideally suited for the initial assault phases that established Imperial control over contested areas. Imperial Army forces assumed responsibility for follow-on operations that eliminated remaining alien populations and secured conquered territory against potential counterattacks. This division of responsibilities required coordination between Legion and Army commanders who operated under different command structures while pursuing common objectives. The systematic elimination of alien populations required procedures that ensured complete eradication while preserving useful infrastructure and resources for Imperial use. Imperial Army units received detailed instructions about the identification and destruction of alien biological materials, their procedures designed to prevent any possibility of genetic material surviving to enable future alien resurgence. These operations demanded thorough searches of conquered territory that could identify hidden alien survivors or concealed breeding facilities that might threaten future Imperial occupation. Planetary cleansing operations represented the most extensive form of anti-Xenos warfare, as entire worlds required systematic sterilization to eliminate all traces of alien presence. Imperial Army formations conducted methodical sweeps of planetary surfaces, their procedures designed to identify and destroy every alien installation, population center, and potential hiding place. The scale of these operations required extensive logistical support and coordination between multiple regiment types, each contributing specialized capabilities to the overall cleansing effort. Urban warfare against alien populations presented unique challenges that required modification of standard Imperial Army tactics, as alien architecture and defensive systems often differed significantly from human designs. Imperial forces learned to expect unusual structural layouts and defensive measures that reflected alien psychology and tactical preferences, their assault techniques adapting to address non-human approaches to fortification and defense. The systematic clearing of alien cities required patience and methodical procedures that ensured no areas remained unsearched. The identification of alien technology suitable for Imperial use required careful evaluation by Mechanicum specialists who could determine whether captured equipment warranted further study or immediate destruction. Most alien technology proved incompatible with Imperial systems or philosophically unacceptable for human use, but occasional discoveries provided insights that contributed to improvements in Imperial equipment design. The process of evaluating captured alien materials required extensive security procedures that prevented potentially dangerous technology from contaminating Imperial forces. Intelligence gathering during anti-Xenos operations focused on understanding alien capabilities and tactical preferences rather than attempting to predict specific enemy actions. Imperial Army intelligence officers learned to analyze alien behavior patterns and technological capabilities to develop tactical approaches that exploited enemy weaknesses while minimizing Imperial vulnerabilities. This intelligence proved particularly valuable when engaging species that Imperial forces had not previously encountered, as understanding alien psychology and tactical doctrine could provide critical advantages during initial contact scenarios. The establishment of quarantine procedures around conquered alien worlds ensured that no potentially dangerous biological or technological materials could escape to threaten other Imperial territories. Imperial Army units maintained security perimeters that prevented unauthorized access to cleansed worlds while monitoring for signs of alien survival or resurgence. These security operations required sustained commitment of military resources that continued long after active combat operations had concluded, their importance recognized despite the drain they imposed on available forces. The technological advancement of the Imperial Army throughout the Great Crusade represented one of the most dramatic military transformations in human history, as primitive projectile weapons gave way to standardized energy-based systems that could maintain effectiveness across the diverse environments encountered during galactic conquest. The early phases of Terran unification had seen Imperial forces employing a bewildering array of salvaged and improvised weaponry, with techno-barbarian auto-rifles fighting alongside primitive stub guns and makeshift explosive devices cobbled together from industrial chemicals. The Emperor's strategic vision demanded standardization that could support millions of soldiers across interstellar distances, creating requirements that pushed Imperial manufacturing capabilities to their absolute limits. The transition from kinetic projectile weapons to LAWS technology began during the latter stages of the Unification Wars, as Mechanicum forged temples on Mars developed manufacturing processes that could produce reliable energy weapons in quantities sufficient to equip entire armies. The early M30 pattern lasguns represented crude but functional designs that prioritized reliability over sophistication, their simple construction enabling field maintenance by soldiers with minimal technical training. These weapons featured basic focusing arrays and power regulation systems that could function effectively despite the harsh conditions and rough handling inevitable during extended military campaigns. The standardization of power pack technology proved equally critical to the Imperial Army's evolution, as energy weapons required portable power sources that could be manufactured consistently across different forge worlds while maintaining universal compatibility. The development of standard template constructs for power pack production enabled any world with basic industrial infrastructure to contribute to the Imperial war effort, reducing dependence on specialized manufacturing centers that might become targets for enemy action. Early power packs provided limited shot capacity and required frequent replacement, but their standardized dimensions and connection protocols ensured that soldiers could utilize ammunition from any Imperial source. Quality control measures for LAWS weapon production required extensive coordination between Mars and the growing network of forge worlds established throughout the expanding Imperium. Mechanicum quality assurance teams conducted regular inspections of manufacturing facilities to ensure adherence to established templates while identifying opportunities for improvement in production efficiency and weapon reliability. The gradual refinement of manufacturing processes resulted in successive pattern improvements that enhanced weapon performance while maintaining backward compatibility with existing logistic systems. The M35 pattern lasgun that emerged during the Great Crusade's middle years represented the culmination of decades of design refinement and manufacturing optimization. This weapon featured improved focusing, arrays that increased effective range and penetration power, while maintaining the rugged reliability that made LAWS weapons ideal for military service. The The standardized design incorporated modular components that facilitated field repair and modification, enabling armor specialists to adapt individual weapons to specific mission requirements without compromising overall system integrity. Regional variations of the standard lasgun pattern reflected local manufacturing capabilities and environmental requirements while preserving core operational characteristics that ensured tactical interoperability. Forge worlds with advanced technical capabilities produced enhanced variants that incorporated superior materials and precision manufacturing techniques, their weapons demonstrating improved accuracy and reliability that made them highly prized by elite formations. Conversely, worlds with limited industrial infrastructure manufactured simplified versions that sacrificed some performance for ease of production and maintenance. The development of specialized LAS weapon variants addressed specific tactical requirements that exceeded the capabilities of standard infantry weapons. Long LAS rifles provided enhanced range and accuracy for designated marksmen, their extended barrels and precision focusing systems, enabling engagement of targets at distances exceeding standard combat ranges. These weapons required specialized training and maintenance procedures that limited their distribution to selected personnel within each regiment, but their tactical value justified the additional complexity and resource allocation. Heavy LAS weapons filled the squad automatic weapon role previously occupied by projectile-based systems, their sustained fire capability providing suppressive fire that could control enemy movement while supporting friendly advances. The development of backpack power systems enabled these weapons to maintain high rates of fire during extended engagements, though the additional weight and complexity required dedicated crew members to operate effectively. Multi-LAS configurations combined multiple standard focusing arrays into single weapon systems that could deliver devastating firepower against both personnel and light vehicle targets. The evolution of armored warfare doctrine within the Imperial Army reflected both technological advancement and tactical lessons learned during major campaigns across diverse operational environments. Early Imperial armored formations had employed a mixture of captured enemy vehicles and improvised designs that reflected local manufacturing capabilities rather than standardized doctrine. The establishment of standard template constructs for vehicle production enabled the development of consistent tactical approaches that could be applied across different theaters while maintaining the flexibility required for diverse mission requirements. The Leman Russ battle tank emerged as the foundation of Imperial armored doctrine, its robust design and reliable performance making it suitable for the wide range of conditions encountered during galactic conquest. The vehicle's modular construction enabled the production of specialized variants that addressed specific tactical requirements while maintaining commonality in major components that simplified logistics and maintenance procedures. Standard Leman Russ tanks mounted battle cannons that could engage both enemy armor and fortified positions, their versatility making them valuable assets across multiple mission types. The development of super heavy vehicle technology represented a quantum leap in Imperial armored capabilities, as massive tanks like the Baneblade provided firepower and protection that dwarfed conventional armored systems. These vehicles required specialized manufacturing facilities and extensive logistical support that limited their deployment to critical operations, where their capabilities proved essential for mission success. The psychological impact of super heavy tanks often exceeded their direct military contribution, as enemy forces faced with such overwhelming displays of Imperial might frequently broke before engaging in direct combat. Armored warfare doctrine evolved through practical experience gained during major campaigns, as Imperial commanders learned to coordinate different vehicle types in combined operations that maximized their collective effectiveness. Tank formations learned to operate in conjunction with mechanized infantry that could secure objectives seized by armored spearheads while providing protection against enemy anti-tank weapons. The systematic integration of artillery support enabled armored formations to suppress enemy defensive positions before advancing, reducing casualties while maintaining operational tempo. The establishment of armored training centers on worlds with suitable terrain provided standardized instruction in vehicle operation and maintenance procedures that ensured consistent performance across different regiments. These facilities incorporated lessons learned from active combat zones while developing new techniques that enhanced tactical effectiveness. Tank crew training emphasized not only individual vehicle operation, but also coordination between multiple vehicles operating as cohesive formations. Their procedures designed to maximize mutual support while maintaining tactical flexibility. Communication systems within the Imperial Army underwent revolutionary development as the scale and complexity of military operations expanded beyond anything previously attempted in human history. Early Imperial forces had relied on basic Vox systems that provided limited range and reliability, their performance often degraded by environmental interference or enemy jamming efforts. The requirements of coordinating millions of soldiers across multiple star systems simultaneously demanded communication capabilities that could function reliably despite the vast distances and hostile conditions encountered during galactic warfare. The development of astropathic communication networks provided strategic coordination capabilities that transcended the limitations of conventional technology, enabling near instantaneous communication across interstellar distances through the use of psychically gifted individuals. These networks required extensive infrastructure and specialized personnel that made them vulnerable to disruption, but their strategic value justified the resources required for their establishment and maintenance. Astropathic communication enabled high-level commanders to coordinate operations across multiple sectors while maintaining awareness of strategic developments throughout the expanding Imperium. Tactical communication systems evolved to address the requirements of coordinating large formations across continental battlefields where conventional radio systems proved inadequate. The development of relay networks enabled communication between units separated by hundreds of kilometers, their signals boosted through chains of automated stations that could maintain contact despite terrain obstacles and electromagnetic interference. These systems required extensive maintenance and protection that consumed significant resources, but their tactical value proved essential for conducting complex multi-phase operations. Battlefield coordination improvements reflected both technological advancement and doctrinal evolution as Imperial Army formations learned to operate as integrated combined arms forces rather than collections of independent units. The establishment of standardized communication procedures enabled different regiment types to coordinate their activities effectively while maintaining operational security that prevented enemy forces from intercepting sensitive tactical information. Command and control systems incorporated redundant communication paths that could maintain coordination despite the inevitable disruption caused by enemy action. The integration of air support assets into Imperial Army operations required sophisticated coordination procedures that could direct aircraft against specific targets while preventing friendly fire incidents. Forward air controllers received specialized training in aircraft identification and target designation procedures, their expertise enabling precise application of air power that maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk to friendly forces. The development of standardized marking systems enabled ground forces to identify their positions to supporting aircraft while designating enemy targets for engagement. Medical innovations within the Imperial Army reflected both the scale of casualties generated by galactic warfare and the diverse environmental hazards encountered across thousands of different worlds. Traditional field medicine proved inadequate for treating the exotic injuries and diseases encountered during campaigns against alien enemies or operations on hostile planets. The development of standardized medical procedures and equipment enabled consistent treatment quality across different theaters while addressing the unique challenges posed by interstellar military operations. The establishment of regimental medical facilities incorporated lessons learned about the importance of rapid treatment for combat casualties, as delays in medical attention significantly increased mortality rates among wounded soldiers. Field hospitals received equipment that could treat conventional combat injuries alongside exotic conditions caused by alien weapons or environmental hazards. Medical personnel received training in recognizing and treating conditions that had no precedent in terrestrial medicine. Their expertise developed through practical experience gained during active campaigns. Evacuation procedures for seriously wounded personnel required coordination between medical units and transportation assets that could move casualties from forward positions to facilities capable of providing advanced treatment. The development of specialized medical vehicles enabled rapid evacuation while providing life support during transport, their equipment designed to stabilize patients during movement across hostile terrain. Medical logistics systems ensured adequate supplies of pharmaceuticals and surgical equipment remained available despite the challenges of maintaining supply lines across interstellar distances. Preventive medicine programs address the health challenges posed by deployment across diverse planetary environments, as Imperial Army units encountered diseases and environmental hazards that could devastate unprepared formations. Immunization protocols developed for specific planetary environments provided protection against local pathogens, while screening procedures identified personnel whose health conditions made them unsuitable for deployment to particular types of worlds. Environmental protection equipment enabled operations on hostile planets where atmospheric conditions would otherwise prevent human survival. Logistical innovations represented perhaps the most critical advancement in Imperial Army capability, as the challenges of supplying millions of soldiers across galactic distances dwarfed any previous military undertaking. The development of standardized supply procedures enabled efficient distribution of equipment and consumables while maintaining the flexibility required to adapt to changing operational requirements. Supply chain management systems tracked inventory levels and consumption rates across multiple theaters, their data enabling strategic planners to allocate resources effectively while identifying potential shortages before they affected operational readiness. The establishment of forward supply bases at strategic locations throughout Imperial space created distribution networks that could respond rapidly to urgent requirements while maintaining strategic reserves for major operations. These facilities incorporated advanced storage systems that could preserve equipment and supplies despite hostile environmental conditions, their automated inventory management reducing the personnel requirements while improving accuracy. Supply-based security required dedicated military assets that could protect critical logistics nodes against enemy attack or sabotage. Transportation systems within the Imperial Army evolved to address the requirements of moving massive quantities of personnel and equipment across interstellar distances while maintaining operational security and efficiency. The development of standardized cargo containers enabled efficient loading and unloading procedures while protecting sensitive equipment during transport. Logistics officers received specialized training in transportation planning and resource allocation, their expertise enabling optimal utilization of available transport capacity. The coordination between Imperial Army logistics and Imperial Navy transportation assets required extensive planning and communication that could synchronize military operations with available shipping capacity. Joint logistics planning sessions established priorities for transportation resources while identifying alternative arrangements that could maintain supply flows despite disruptions caused by enemy action or mechanical failures. The development of contingency plans for various supply disruption scenarios enabled continued operations despite the inevitable challenges of interstellar warfare. The transformation of the Imperial Army into the Astra Militarum represents one of the most enduring institutional legacies of the Great Crusade era, with organizational structures, tactical doctrines, and military traditions established during humanity's galactic expansion, continuing to shape imperial military operations 10 millennia later. The fundamental framework created during the 30th and 31st millennia provided the foundation upon which the modern Imperial Guard built its identity as the hammer of the Emperor, though the intervening centuries brought modifications that reflected hard-learned lessons about the nature of warfare in a galaxy consumed by perpetual conflict. The regimental system that emerged from the post-heresy reforms preserved many organizational elements that had proven effective during the Great Crusade, while implementing safeguards designed to prevent the large-scale betrayals that had characterized the Civil War. The standardized regimental structure adopted by the reformed military maintained the tactical flexibility that had made Imperial Army formations effective across diverse operational environments, while deliberately limiting unit size and autonomous capability. Modern Astra Militarum regiments trace their organizational DNA directly to the Imperial Army formations that had conquered the galaxy, their command hierarchies and tactical doctrines representing evolutionary refinements of systems developed during humanity's greatest military expansion. The emphasis on combined arms coordination that had distinguished Imperial Army operations during major campaigns like Ulanor became a cornerstone of Astra Militarum doctrine, though the post-heresy separation of services created additional complexity in implementing these tactical approaches. The integration of infantry, armor, and artillery that had proven so effective during the Great Crusade required adaptation to new command structures that deliberately prevented single commanders from controlling all elements of combined operations. Modern Imperial Guard doctrine still reflects the combined arms principles developed during the 30th millennium, though their application occurs within organizational frameworks designed to prevent the concentration of military power that had enabled the heresy. Recruitment practices established during the Great Crusade created the tithe system that continues to supply manpower for imperial military operations, though the scale and systematic nature of modern recruitment far exceeds anything attempted during the earlier period. The assessment procedures developed for evaluating newly compliant worlds provided templates that evolved into the comprehensive demographic analysis systems used by modern Adeptus Militarum officials. The recognition that different worlds possessed distinct advantages for military service led to the specialization patterns that characterize modern Guard regiments, with Death worlds continuing to produce elite formations, while Hive worlds supply the numerical bulk of Imperial forces. The technological foundations laid during the Imperial Army era established equipment patterns that remain standard throughout the modern Imperium, though 10 millennia of warfare have brought refinements that improve performance while maintaining the reliability and ease of maintenance that made these designs successful. The M35 pattern lasgun, developed during the Great Crusade, became the ancestor of the M36 Cantrell pattern and other variants that equip modern Guard formations, their core design principles unchanged despite numerous detail improvements. The emphasis on standardization and interoperability that characterized Imperial Army equipment procurement created the template for modern Imperial military logistics. The Leman Russ battle tank exemplifies the enduring nature of Great Crusade-era military technology, as this vehicle design continues to serve as the backbone of Imperial armored formations despite its origins in the 30th millennium. The tank's robust construction and reliable performance that made it effective during the conquest of Ulanor and countless other campaigns proved equally valuable during the subsequent millennia of warfare against chaos, xenos, and heretical human forces. Modern variants incorporate technological improvements and specialized configurations that address specific tactical requirements, but the fundamental design remains recognizably descended from the vehicles that spearheaded Imperial Army armored assaults across the galaxy. The preservation of regimental honors and battle standards from the Imperial Army era created traditions that continue to inspire modern Astra Militarum formations, with some regiments tracing their lineage directly back to units that served during the Great Crusade. The Mordian Iron Guard maintains battle honors earned during compliance campaigns of the 30th millennium, their ceremonial traditions and uniform details preserving elements that date back to their service alongside the Space Marine legions. These connections to the Imperial Army era provide psychological anchors that reinforce unit identity and esprit de corps among soldiers who serve in formations with histories spanning 10,000 years of continuous service. Battle standards bearing campaign honors from Great Crusade operations serve as focal points for regimental pride and tradition, their presence on modern battlefields creating tangible links to the heroic age of imperial expansion. Regiments that can trace their origins to Imperial Army formations that participated in major campaigns like the Ulanor Crusade or the compliance of significant Xenos empires display these achievements with pride that transcends the individual soldiers who currently serve in their ranks. The ceremonial protocols surrounding these ancient honors create shared identity that binds modern guardsmen to their predecessors who conquered the galaxy in the Emperor's name. The influence of Great Crusade veterans on subsequent generations of Imperial military leadership created institutional knowledge that shaped tactical doctrine and operational procedures throughout the Imperium's history. Officers who had served during the galaxy's conquest brought practical experience that informed the development of training programs and tactical manuals used by later generations of Imperial commanders. The systematic recording of lessons learned during major Imperial Army campaigns created doctrinal foundations that continued to influence military thinking long after the original participants had died or been lost to the passage of time. The staff college system established on Terra during the Great Crusade provided the model for advanced military education throughout the Imperium, with institutions like the Schola Progenium incorporating tactical principles and case studies derived from Imperial Army operations. The analysis of major campaigns conducted by Imperial Army formations became standard curriculum for officer candidates, their study of historical examples providing insights into the application of combined arms doctrine and the coordination of large-scale military operations. These educational programs ensured that tactical innovations developed during the Great Crusade continued to influence Imperial military practice centuries after their original implementation. Combat doctrines developed through practical experience during the Imperial Army's campaigns against diverse enemy types became foundational elements of modern Imperial Guard training and tactical manuals. The anti-Xenos procedures refined during encounters with Orc empires, Eldar raiders, and other alien threats provided templates for engaging similar enemies throughout Imperial history. The systematic approach to xenocide operations developed during the Great Crusade established protocols that modern Imperial forces continue to employ when confronting non-human threats, their effectiveness proven through millennia of successful application. The siege warfare techniques pioneered during major Imperial Army operations, like the reduction of Goro, became standard procedures that influenced Imperial military engineering throughout subsequent centuries. The methodical approaches to fortification reduction and urban warfare developed during Great Crusade campaigns provided tactical frameworks that proved equally effective against Chaos cultists, Orc Waags, and other enemies encountered during the Imperium's long history. Modern siege regiments employ equipment and techniques that represent direct evolution from tools and procedures developed by Imperial Army engineer units during the 30th millennium. Logistical systems created to support the Imperial Army's galactic operations established organizational principles that continue to govern Imperial military supply chains despite the vastly different strategic situation facing the modern Imperium. The standardization of equipment patterns and supply procedures that enabled the Imperial Army to maintain operations across multiple sectors simultaneously provided the foundation for modern Adeptus Militarum logistics doctrine. The emphasis on redundant supply lines and strategic stockpiling that characterized Imperial Army logistics planning became standard practice that helps modern Imperial forces maintain operational capability despite the constant threats facing supply convoys. The integration of human auxiliaries into Imperial Army formations created precedents that continue to influence modern Imperial Guard organization, with Ogren and Rattling units serving alongside baseline human formations in roles that mirror their Great Crusade predecessors. The tactical applications developed for these specialized troops during the Imperial Army era established employment doctrines that modern commanders continue to follow when incorporating human assets into their operational plans. The successful integration of these forces during the galaxy's conquest demonstrated their military value while establishing procedures that ensure their effective utilization within predominantly human formations. The relationship between Imperial Army formations and Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade created coordination protocols that influenced subsequent interactions between the Imperial Guard and Adeptus Astartes chapters. The division of responsibilities that evolved during major campaigns established patterns of cooperation that continue to characterize joint operations between these forces, with Guard formations providing numerical strength and logistical support while Space Marines contribute elite assault capabilities. The mutual respect that developed between Imperial Army and Legion commanders during successful campaigns created institutional relationships that survived the post-Heresy reorganization. Regional military traditions that were incorporated into Imperial Army doctrine during the Great Crusade continue to influence the character and capabilities of modern Guard regiments recruited from the same worlds. The Catachan jungle fighting techniques that proved so valuable during Death World campaigns remain central to that world's military contribution to Imperial forces, while Tallarn desert warfare expertise continues to distinguish regiments from that desert world. These specialized capabilities represent living legacies of the Imperial Army era, with tactical knowledge passed down through generations of soldiers who serve in formations that maintain their ancestors' military traditions. The psychological impact of the Imperial Army's achievements during the Great Crusade created legends and traditions that continue to inspire Imperial military personnel throughout the galaxy. Stories of heroic actions by Imperial Army soldiers during major campaigns became part of regimental folklore that motivates modern guardsmen facing similar challenges. The example set by Imperial Army veterans who sacrificed themselves in defense of the Imperium during the Horus Heresy provides moral inspiration that reinforces the dedication to duty that characterizes the modern Astra Militarum. The technological innovations developed during the Imperial Army era established manufacturing and maintenance procedures that continue to support Imperial military operations despite the technological stagnation that has characterized much of the Imperium's subsequent history. The standard template constructs created for Imperial Army equipment enabled consistent production quality that modern Forge worlds continue to achieve through adherence to established patterns. The emphasis on reliability and ease of maintenance that characterized Imperial Army equipment design remains a priority for modern military procurement, ensuring that Guard formations can maintain operational effectiveness despite the challenging conditions they encounter. Medical procedures and evacuation protocols developed during Imperial Army operations created the foundation for modern Imperial Guard medical services, with trauma treatment techniques and casualty evacuation procedures representing refinements of systems established during the Great Crusade. The field hospitals and medical logistics networks that supported Imperial Army campaigns provided organizational models that continue to influence modern military medical operations. The recognition of medical care as essential for maintaining unit effectiveness that characterized Imperial Army doctrine remains a priority for modern Guard formations. Training methodologies developed during the Imperial Army era established educational frameworks that continue to prepare Imperial Guard personnel for military service, though modern training incorporates additional emphasis on loyalty and resistance to corruption that reflects lessons learned during the heresy. The basic military skills and tactical knowledge taught to Imperial Army recruits remain core elements of modern Guard training programs, their effectiveness proven through millennia of successful application. The progression from basic training through specialized instruction that characterized Imperial Army personnel development continues to shape modern military education. The legacy of the Imperial Army extends beyond purely military considerations to encompass the broader imperial culture and identity that emerged during the Great Crusade. The concept of human unity under the Emperor's guidance that motivated Imperial Army soldiers became a foundational element of imperial ideology that continues to inspire loyalty throughout the Imperium. The sacrifice and dedication displayed by Imperial Army personnel during the galaxy's conquest created heroic examples that reinforce imperial values and provide moral guidance for subsequent generations. As the 41st millennium draws to a close, and the Imperium faces threats that rival those encountered during the Great Crusade, the legacy of the Imperial Army remains visible in every aspect of imperial military organization and doctrine. The Astra Militarum, that stands as humanity's primary military force, represents the direct institutional descendant of the formations that conquered the galaxy in the Emperor's name, their traditions and capabilities shaped by 10,000 years of continuous evolution from the foundations laid during humanity's greatest military expansion. The courage, dedication, and tactical excellence that characterized the Imperial Army during its finest hour continue to inspire the countless guardsmen who serve as the Emperor's sword and shield in humanity's darkest age, ensuring that the legacy of the Great Crusade endures in the face of unimaginable threats that would consume lesser military institutions. The Imperial Army's transformation into the Astra Militarum represents not merely an administrative reorganization, but the evolution of humanity's greatest military achievement into a force capable of defending the Imperium across 10 millennia of constant warfare. The foundations laid during the 30th and 31st millennia continue to support the massive military structure that enables human civilization to survive in a galaxy filled with existential threats, testament to the vision and dedication of those who created the institutional framework that remains humanity's primary defense against the darkness that would consume it.